Everybody?
Oh, it's 9 o'clock.
Everyone? Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Birds diving. There's a lot of bait back.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock, Thursday, April 4th, 2019. This is a work session of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council with all members of the council present. If you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank all of you for being here this morning. Our first item on the agenda is an update on the Estera Boulevard project. Doug?
It's not working.
Amy, is this microphone working? No. Doug, if you'll come to the other side, thank you.
Morning, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Doug Muir, Assistant Lee County Manager. Things are going well. So what I'd like to do is maybe recap the results of what we call our executive committee meeting last week. That was held last Thursday. That really is a meeting that we restrict the attendance to simply the decision makers of the design team, the construction groups, and management of both Fort Myers Beach and Lee County. We really don't discuss technical details. What we discuss are funding, schedule, any potential challenges that we might have that need a decision quickly in order to overcome it. It was a good meeting. Right now I can say that I think the teamwork between the town and the county is as good as it's been during this project, and very much appreciative of that. So we just, we're moving along right now based on last week's meeting. Our current schedule is we expect to be completed with segment 2 in June of this year. In fact, our date is June 17th, 2019. We have already begun work on segments 3 and 4. We're combining segments, and we really just have 2 more to go. So we're combining 3 and 4, and we're combining 5 and 6. So we have 2 major segments left until we complete the job. Segment 3 and 4 is underway, and we anticipate completion at the end of July in 2020. And we will bid segments 5 and 6 prior to the completion of that, and actually start it prior to the completion of those segments, and commence that in March of 2020 next year, with an anticipated completion of December of 2021. So our master schedule right now is we're on track. We are focused on that 2021 completion. Again, we have critical path tasks, and those are the ones we really focus on to make sure that we don't have delays on those. Some of the other tasks are not as critical. They can float if we need to shift resources to those critical tasks. Our only concerns are some of the construction activity is dependent on delivery of materials. It's a pretty robust construction industry worldwide. Materials are under demand, so we need to have enough foresight to try to order pipe of certain types well in advance in order to be able to get delivery to facilitate the schedule. But both of the design groups, the construction groups, are doing a great job of identifying those issues and trying to get out ahead of them. We are working with, again, this project has multiple participants. I think I mentioned last time that we had a little bit of concern about a change in contractors for CenturyLink and some of the fiber optic that they are putting in a trench. I believe we have some contacts that have helped facilitate some acceleration of that. So it's still a concern, but we think that we are making progress there. The issues that have come up in the last couple of weeks, we've gotten some complaints on some noise of some storm grates. They've gone through several different types of fixes on those. Some have not been successful. The most recent one seems to be working. We're monitoring it. I know we had one grate that actually dislodged completely. That the town was very helpful in identifying it, coning it off, letting the county know. Our DOT got out here and fixed that. So in the big picture, it's a minor issue, but if you're a victim of the noise, we understand that it's an inconvenience, so we are focused on trying to resolve that particular issue. The last item is your Councilman Butcher, maybe 6 months ago, had the opportunity to take a tour of a segment of the road work with Darren Brown of Christelle. And I think in subsequent conversations with him, I think it's very enlightening to understand that this is not just a simple road job that you see progress, every 100 feet and move forward. It's several different projects, and the fact of trying to manage traffic with all of those projects going on makes this one of the most challenging projects that I've ever been involved in. We have, I know your mayor has reached out about a potential tour, but I'd like to offer that to all of you. I think it would be very educational. Darren Brown of Christelle would be available to walk you through a segment of the project to kind of show you the complexities and why we approach it the way we do in terms of scheduling and traffic control. If anybody's interested, certainly through your town manager, through Roger, if you want to let us know, Darren would be, he's made himself available to provide that tour for anybody that would like to do that. So with that, that's really everything I have to say today.
Thank you very much, Doug. Bruce, any questions?
Well, just a couple of quick ones. Segment 2, you said it will be done at June?
Yes.
June 17th, okay. It just seemed like it's taken a long time right there in front of the Red Coconut to get that pavement started there. Is there any particular reason for that?
We had some utility conflicts there. There were some unanticipated gravity sewer lines through that area. In order to get the materials that would allow us to respond to that and to work around it, took a long time.
Oh, I remember that, but I mean, it just seems like you've been ready to I mean, we've moved the traffic over for several weeks now, haven't we? It just seemed like it's to get started with that pavement section. That's not the whole, I understand the gravity sewer problems. It just seems like it's taken a long time.
And a difficult section, but that should be part of the completion by June.
This is for, well, I'll ask this question first. Bus stops. We sort of talked around that a few times over the years. And I know Rob is working, setting where bus stops are going to be in the future. But even where they are today that are fixed at this point in time, what can we do to get shelters there? And maybe you don't need a shelter on both sides of the street. Maybe you need one every half a mile or quarter mile. Is there something we can do to expand the number of bus shelters?
That would be a discussion with our transit group. I'd be happy to and work with Rob and have Rob contact them to ask that very question. How do we study that?
Rogers had some communication with someone in Lee County with.
Yeah, so I shared with the council a ongoing conversation I had with Dave Harner, Doug, who I believe oversees the Lee Tran.
Correct.
And in fact, at one point, Roger Desjardins was part of the conversation. And what was related to me, which I subsequently related to town council, was at this point in time, there's no bus shelters being contemplated along the Estera Boulevard bus routes. One of the issues they raised is that the town has a no advertising policy. And one of the ways the county offsets the cost of these shelters is by selling advertisement space on them. And it was generally related to me that basically at this point they have no budget for the bus shelters and there are none contemplated at this particular point in time, but obviously something we could talk about prospectively.
I think there's a history there that involves that advertising, and I'm not certain of the details.
But apparently, Bonita Springs has an interlocal agreement with them to work around that no advertising, right, Roger?
Yes, it was handled through an agreement with Bonita Springs, and that was also part of the packet I sent out. I believe I sent out to council. if the council wanted to entertain moving in that direction. But also, as Doug, as you probably know from your inspections of the road, and I know Rob knows intimately, the other thing is just, they're having a challenge finding spaces for the bus benches, much less the shelter. So we don't necessarily have room within the right-of-way for them. And we definitely don't have arrangements with, at least at this point, with private properties potentially put a bus shelter. So there are several challenges that would have to be overcome for a program to be implemented.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I see, is that we're not looking out and addressing these problems early enough. And if we have sites, maybe we could go talk to landlords or something and get someone to give us a little easement area to put a shelter. But if we don't have a plan of where we need them or want them, then everything's going to be done, and we'll be sitting back here saying, well, geez, it's too late now. So that's my view. So.
Also, just on that point, what was related to me, and it predates me, was that there is a discussion of these potential bus sites, a joint discussion of these potential bus sites at some point in time. And I don't know, as part of that siting activity, there were discussions about shelters or not, and the limiting factors with regarding shelters. So I just don't know. But you're right. There are perhaps some locations where the properties along Estera are large enough that we possibly could enter into an arrangement. And just pick one out of the sky. Santini Plaza, I'm sure we have a very cooperative property owner, property manager there who might work with us to create a spot for a bus shelter.
There is one there, so
yeah,
that's the
well,
problem solved.
a full-blown shelter.
Well, it is. isn't it?
Okay, so to keep it there or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's one example, and there may
Well,
be some others.
I know that recently we had someone at one of the condos, Gull Wing, maybe they came in and wanted to, or maybe it's Gull Wing, I can't remember. And they said they will allow a bus stop there. And I can't remember which one it was, but there's opportunities if we pick some spots. And what's it? Maybe it's Carousel. I don't know. One of them down there. So there may be opportunities to do some things. And there, I'm still not healed. I can remember several years ago, sorry to keep you standing there, but when I was reading in the local newspaper about some ladies up at the north end, and they were complaining that there wasn't bus shelters. And they said, we're 85 years old, and we like riding the trolley, and we don't like going out there and standing in the hot sun. And I thought, wow, you can't do something for everybody. And then I realized how hot it was here. And I could see where people would want some shelter to go out there and ride the trolley. And it's better now that you've got the app, so you can maybe anticipate when the trolley's coming. But even today, that app sometimes doesn't work with the traffic interruptions and things. But it's a problem. So I think we need to figure something out with the council to make something happen. Rob, you want to add something to that?
Rob Phelan for the record. Yeah, one of the big limitations we have is this right-of-way width and all the features that we're putting in there. We're making all of our trolley stop locations a minimum of 8 feet deep. Lee-Tran generally likes 9 feet. One of the problems we tried it, and that 9 feet gives them enough space to put one of their standard shelters on the pad. Where we can accommodate that additional width, we will, but we're oftentimes right up against the back of the right-of-way. Currently, we're preparing we're working at the 30% plan level for segment 5-6. There are a couple locations where we've got trolley pull-offs identified in segment 5-6. But some of and we've done that where we have available space to actually provide a trolley pull-off. There may be some opportunities through that segment because we do have a little bit wider right-of-way to make the trolley stops a little wider to accommodate a future bus shelter if necessary. But in the segment 5-6 plans, there's an opportunity for, and I've asked the safety committee to take a look at this, is identify locations where they think that bus shelters, some of the inline bus shelters may be, or bus stops may be appropriate. So in segment 5-6, if you know some willing landowners down in that area that may be able to accommodate additional space, we can certainly look at those areas.
The other thing is that if you have a bench, there may be some sort of innovative shade shelter you can put up that doesn't require the full 9-foot box thing. I mean,
Bruce, could I jump in real
yeah,
quick?
but just one thing. I hate to be constrained by not thinking out of the box. That's it.
I am pretty sure that I've seen bus shelters along Gladiolus that are not the big 9-foot rectangles. They're like a bench that goes around a pole, and then they have a small square shade shelter on it.
I'm intimately familiar with those shelters. I actually did the design for them.
I love them, and they're
They are
smaller.
very good, but they are very, they do take up quite a bit of space. So,
Really?
yeah.
Was around.
They look
Yeah.
small.
They're about, the shelter, the canopy on that is about a 10 by 10 canopy.
Really?
Yeah, so the actual little seat is small and it's round. Some of the linear shelters generally take up less of a footprint, if you can fit them in the back. So, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation we can have with Lee-Tran as far as identifying what they have opportunities. And again, the conversation that Roger had with the director over there may be, a good starting point as well.
Rob, with all due respect, much like the landscaping conversation, I think we all feel like the time for discussions is past and we need a plan. Or at least we need to be told, nope, the landscaping is what it is, and no, there aren't going to be shelters unless you do A, B, C. If we had that information, then we could make some better decisions. So for example, if the holdup is in fact advertising, well, maybe the council would make a decision to allow certain kinds of advertising. There needs to be some resolution. So, because I agree completely, there needs to be some resolution so we don't keep coming back to this with this sort of anticipation of what's it going to be? Is it going to be anything?
We can put together some talking points of what the issues are for transit with regard to the shelters,
Okay.
which would give you something to discuss, to see what the challenges are. As far as the landscaping goes, again, as I've told you before, it's not unlike a new home construction, where landscaping is typically the last thing to take a look at. We do have some opportunities in segments 5 and 6 for, we have wider right-of-way. We might have some landscaping options there that are more in line with what our core services are. We also, I think you're all aware of kind of the conceptual design of what I would call the front door of Fort Myers Beach, where you come off the bridge, and utilization of some of the town's property and the county's property. We've also kind of reserved the possibility of enhanced landscaping there that might draw from the budget. So we're really focusing on getting the job done, and landscaping, and I know it's a priority for you, but from the standpoint of project management, it's kind of a second-tier issue right now.
On this point, is there any opportunity, since you said you're all the way down to 5 and 6 with potential locations, would the town council be able to see the locations you've picked so that we can kind of brainstorm ourselves as we go down the boulevard and look?
I don't know if anything has been picked. Go ahead.
A set of plans have been provided to the town, so there's a roll plot. I think Chelsea's plotted out a roll plot that you could go take a look at, and the trolley pull-offs, the actual pull-offs are identified on there. You'll see where they are. But the inline stops, the ones that are actually in the travel lane that don't require the pull-off or can't accommodate the pull-off, aren't shown, so those have some availability for adjustment.
Okay. Go ahead.
One last thing. I see Kay out there. It has to do with my crayon project. I forgot to add one thing on there.
Did you say crayons?
Yeah, well,
That thing he
my
did
pin
once.
project,
Oh, yeah.
whatever. If you could add in the concrete barrier, you know, where we're sketching things, so if you had a concrete barrier in that layout, I would identify that as well as the other little things.
I can tell you from the last meeting, Councilman Butcher, we are working. I took notes and made sure to disperse those notes to everybody that could help. So we are looking at that. Not only has Kay had some ideas, but our GIS department is looking with Rob's direction at how to come up with something that is, you know, as you said, a kind of a simplified view of the progress. Councilman Murphy, you had some concerns about some of the dips in the pavement, and that's been passed on. I think that we're going to follow up with you to see if we have specific locations. So those things are, I forgot them in the past, but I hadn't forgot them this time. So we are working on them.
All right, thank you.
Ray?
I'm just wondering if we as a town could put the word out to property owners, you know, in some sort of advertisement or anything. Anybody that is interested in possibly having a bench out in front of their place or whatever, because there probably are a lot of the hotels and condos that might be interested in something like that. And then we could get sort of a database of those people that are interested and then see if it fits in with the overall plan. You know, you could pick A, B, C, or D, or A, F, G, whatever, and see if any of those work. It's just an idea. And I'm also thinking out ahead for our children here on the beach, our school kids, you know, in light of that tragedy over in Cape Coral last week, you know, the little Aiken girl. You know, if we had these stops more identified and with roofs over them and pads out there where the kids could gather and wait for their bus as well, you know, rather than spread out all over. Because I know how it is. It's catch as catch can down here with the buses, with the school kids. The bus comes and they'll stop over here for one kid and they'll go down there and they'll pick up 5 kids. And, you know, but if it was a little more congested and they didn't have to make all these stops and the kids were safe in one location, because I know the parents come out and they sit there with in their vehicles with the lights on, watching the kids in the morning, and I get that. But if they were off the boulevard in some sort of at least identifiable structure, whether it had a roof on it or not, just a pad and a bench would be a good start. So, just you know, there must be some sort of tie-in there eventually.
You know what, Ray? Twice last week, I pulled over to tell young girls to get off the street. In front of the Santini trolley stop, the trolley stop itself is empty. There's 3 girls literally sitting on the curb with their feet in the street. And then over by Suncaper here on the curb, another one, that they're sitting on the curb and not in the trolley stop. It's the oddest thing. But anyhow, I agree with you. Rexanne, anything?
Seems to have been well covered so far. I share the concerns of my fellow councilors, and I would be certainly willing to discuss some changes in our advertising policy if that will help us.
Ben?
I would just like to circle back to Mr. Moyer. You mentioned the front door, you know, the idea that landscape comes last. But that also brings to mind when we go to completing section 5 and 6 completion by the end of 2021, do we have to circle back then to the area from the bridge to Crescent? Is there any work to be done in that area? Or is that going to be done in the mix of the sections 3, 4, and 5 and 6?
Right now, anything from the base of the bridge to Crescent is very conceptual at the moment. We are working with the town. We're also working with FDOT to try to dovetail with some of the plans that FDOT has for improvements. I mean, the most immediate thing you'll see is the signalization project, but they are looking at some improvements on San Carlos Boulevard. They're talking about the potential of widening the bridge to facilitate more pedestrian and bicycle traffic, and also to facilitate a third right-hand turn lane there. So none of that has been absolutely finalized, even though it's moving on to the work plan. And so we're coordinating with them. What we would anticipate right now over the next year or so to really work on the concept and make sure that it works for all involved. At best, it would be, if we wanted to add it to this project, at the very best, it would be subsequent to the 2021 completion. So if concept is approved, we'd have to look at the design, we'd have to look at the funding, how to do that, and when that type of project might start. We also have programmed right now that after the segments 5 and 6 are completed, that will be the potential start date for the Big Carlos Bridge. So we will have some potentially major projects on both ends of Estera Boulevard.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Thanks a lot, Doug. We really appreciate you taking your time to come and update us every month.
Thanks.
Appreciate it very much, all of you guys. And Darren, I'll be getting with you.
Thanks,
I'll
Rob.
send you a follow-up on that. If anybody else wants to do the Estera Boulevard, just follow up with Darren. Thanks very much. Anybody else? Anybody else from the crew have anything to add? Okay, Rob, Brent, nobody? Okay, thank you guys very much. Gosh. We'll move on to the next item, which is, I saw Mark Kincaid, and I don't see him now. Next item is an update on the mooring field, but I don't see Mr. Kincaid.
He was here, he just might have stepped out while,
Okay,
where.
here he comes. Good morning, Chelsea. Good morning, Mark. This microphone isn't working, so if you guys would come over here, please. Nice to see you, Mark.
Nice to see you all. Good morning. My name's Mark Kincaid, Coastal Engineering. Thank you for having me here. After your last planning meeting last month, Roger and Chelsea thought it would be a good idea to have me come in and talk about one of my favorite subjects, the mooring field. So we'll just get right into it. This is an aerial, and I don't know if you can see it real good. Those TVs are pretty big, but from where you are, it can be hard to see. But we've got two areas that have been actively working for, since 2005 as mooring field. We got the east mooring field, we have the west mooring field, and everything's great. Everything seems to be working pretty good, but during season, we're at capacity for a solid 3 months, and it seems to keep getting more. And on the west side of the bridge, there seems to be a trend that people want to start anchoring over there, so there's been a conversation to maybe expand the mooring field over to that side of the bridge. This was
Excuse me, Mark, I hate to interrupt you. Can you just go back and tell them what the yellow line was?
Oh, sure I can. So the yellow line is the town boundary. It's 1,000 feet out from the shoreline of the town. So you as the town has jurisdiction in that area. So both mooring fields that exist right now are in that jurisdiction, and as well as the proposed area that we're looking at for future expansion. So this is just one idea of the expansion, but what I wanted to talk to you about for this proposed expansion is the restraints that we're up against. There's a federal channel that runs underneath of the bridge that everybody's aware of, and the Army Corps of Engineers controls that federal channel. They say that we have to have certain setbacks on each side of the federal channel to be able to moor. So it's 100 feet on either side of the channel. That's going to restrain where we can potentially get a submerged land lease and potentially put in moorings. To the north side, your restraints is water depth and resources. So that bar that you can see in that aerial it gets shallow over there. We wouldn't want to put a mooring field in anything less than 6 feet of water, and there's seagrasses that are growing up on that shoal. So we don't want to have anybody on top of there disrupting that. If we go back to that first slide where it says proposed expansion, if you look, there's a little tiny couple of white dots up close to the yellow line, there are some sailboats up there right now that have just dropped their anchor in the middle of the seagrass, and as the boats rotate around, it is damaging the seagrass. So that's something that we would want to avoid. So how do we go about expanding it? Well, we have to go through the permitting. We have to get FDEP permit. We have to get the Army Corps permit. Believe it or not, it has gotten easier since we did this back. We started that project for this mooring field back in '99, and it didn't go into the water until about 2005. We don't think it's going to take that long. We were one of the first mooring fields to get permitted. I think it was the second mooring field in the state to go through that process, but they have since streamlined it on both the DEP side and the Corps side. So we believe that while we still have to go through all the paperwork to do it, it's not going to be as expensive or as timely as it did the first go around.
What are those estimates, Mark?
Estimates for the costs?
Time and cost.
I think the permitting is probably on the neighborhood of 6 months instead of years. There aren't resources there. The Corps will still have to do a public notice and still get, so we are at the mercy of the federal agencies. So I can't guarantee that time frame, but it will be much shorter because of the permitting processes and the realization of the permitting agencies that these mooring fields are better than if people just put their anchor in, and it's less impactful to the environment.
Back up a slide.
Sure.
So isn't there an opportunity to extend that all the way down to?
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, there is. We can, let me go back another slide. You can see where, just use that island as a landmark. You can see how far back the sailboats are, or the boats. There's more than just sailboats over there. But you can see how far to the west those boats extend. So yes, we can get in more. And we can talk about the size too. There's our mooring field over here is restricted to 50 feet. The largest boat that we would like for the radius is about 50 feet. We could offer moorings for larger boats over there. The boats, people are getting larger and larger boats. So if we saw that was a need, we could put in mooring systems that would service larger boats, and that would be a good area to do it. It's not as protected as the area on the east side of the bridge. I think larger boats would be fine out there. So that's something to consider too. We're talking the picture right now that we're looking at is from a 30,000-foot view. When we get down into the details, we can work through what size radiuses we'd like, what size boats we'd like in there. The idea now that I'm trying to discuss is that something that the council's interested in pursuing? Do we want to entertain permitting a mooring field over there? Okay, so amenities and services. So the things that we, as the town, would provide to the people out on the water that's using the mooring field is the dinghy dock, trash and recycling, places to drop that off or get it picked up, laundry facilities, potable water, sanitary pump out services, restrooms and showers, and then the harbor master patrolling the area and providing any assistance on the water out there that they can. Here's a picture of the bridge and the dinghy dock, and if you look at that picture, it's almost like a cartoon. The amount of boats that are tied up to each other and to the dock, and the people are climbing over each other's boats to get in there. And during seasons, that is not an uncommon scene. So one of the things that we think about, whether we expand or not, is we need to provide a little bit more capacity for the dinghy docks. And I think if you've been out there or if you listen to boaters that are using the mooring field, that they may have had that discussion with you already. Here's, during a different time of the year, here's some pictures of the dinghy dock as it exists now. It's been servicing as well from 2005, but there is some wear and tear, and then Irma really took a toll on it in 2017. So we're looking at doing some repairs on that. Here's the planned view of the how it's constructed now, and you can pay attention to how the fixed dock on the lower right-hand side goes out, and then there's a gangway, and the gangway is actually over top of the deck of the floating dock. What we're proposing to do is, in this slide, we want to shorten that fixed pier and move the dock out slightly, and then add another float between the seawall and the existing dock so that we can get that gangway off of the dock. That will increase the usable deck service of the dinghy dock. And but when we do that, we would raise the fixed dock up to the elevation of the parking lot, and that would allow it to become an ADA accessible facility too. Right now, we are coming off of the parking lot, and you kind of go down off of the parking lot, and it's really not ADA. So if we do this, it'll make it better for everybody, not just ADA, but you'll just walk at the same elevation from the parking lot out to that dock and then down the gangway. You won't walk on the main dock, you'll dump off to this new float that we're proposing. And the way we have this drawn up, it's still within the submerged land lease that we already have. It didn't change that footprint enough to have to modify the submerged land lease. So your staff did a great job putting together a grant application, and they were ranked second in the state for a FBIP grant to the tune of about $65,000. There were probably, how many, 70? There were at least 70 applicants throughout the state, and the town was ranked second for that. So kudos to the staff for getting that done. So we have funds from the state to help us do this project. We're in the stages now where the construction plans are close to being done, and we're going to get with the town to put it into a bid package to get that out for construction. We just don't want to do that during season when it's the busiest time. We're going to stage that so it's in the summertime, fall time, so that there's not as many people trying to use it. So right now we're using the service provider as Matanzas Inn. So the town has a contract with Matanzas Inn. Boaters come in to the mooring field, they hook up to the ball, they come into Matanzas Inn, and they come in to sign the lease, whether it's for a day or for a month or whatever period of time they're going to use it. Matanzas Inn is paid for those services, and then they collect the money, and then they give a portion of that money to the town. But Matanzas Inn, for the money that the town pays them, has to provide services. One of the services is the check-in and the slip assignments. The other services that they provide are showers, restrooms, laundry facilities. The building that you see in the upper middle of that slide is the building where the laundry and the restrooms are housed. The door, the bright orange door to the left is the laundry facility, and that view on the bottom is what the laundry facility looks like. And then the doors on the east side of the building, to your right, those two doors, that's the restroom. And inside the restroom, you have the shower and a toilet. And that's a picture of the inside. If you see that to the left, it's got a sign on the door telling you what the times that those restrooms are open. So it's not open 24 hours to the people. It's open from 8 to 9. So I'm not sure what everybody's doing outside of those hours, but I just wanted to bring to your attention that there is a restriction on the hours there. They also, while you're in the laundry room, there is a internet access available at that table, but they do not have dock space available for the dinghies. Everybody has to pull up to the dinghy dock. Matanzas doesn't let the dinghies pull up to their dockage. So that leads to, well, what can we do? Where can we start on improving and expanding the facilities for the uplands?
Excuse me for interrupting, Mark.
Yes.
I believe, I don't know if the council's aware that our agreement with Matanzas is sort of getting to the point where we'll either have to enter into a new agreement with them prospectively, or if we're going to sort of try to do something on our own, we're sort of reaching that point, that decision point. So that's why Mark's going into this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. So we're trying to think outside of the box. What can we do to improve the facilities? This mooring field, we're in a tremendous place. I think that we can make this really a destination to people would want to come here. I think we could attract more people here if the facilities were brought up to a higher standard. So here's one location that the town already has access to. This is a street right-of-way at the end of Virginia Street. Here's a close-up of what that property looks like. It's in the red box there. It's waterfront, so there's area there that a dock could be built where you could do whatever we wanted. One idea was we could put the pump-out boat at that location. There's the lot size is about a 50 by 100. So there's another thought that perhaps a harbor master office could be constructed there. If it was a stilted structure, it could be elevated to a second story where they could look out, and because of its proximity to the mooring field, you can see the west fields to the left and the east fields to the right. If they're at that location, the harbor master from that building could see every ball in the system. So that would be a unique situation for that property. Another idea is a little bit closer to where we are today, and that's directly behind Town Hall. There's some properties back there. Some of the properties, at least one of the properties, is on the market right now, I believe. But there are multiple lots behind here that are undeveloped, and it has access to the water. Again, the location relative to the mooring field, you can see it's almost near the center. And that would offer a really good opportunity for the town to be able to provide services in-house. We could provide the restrooms, the laundry facilities. We have staff here already manning the front offices that the boaters could come in and check in with and assign the mooring slips. I'm just bringing this up for everybody's consideration and ideas. These are two locations that we came up with readily. Other ideas may be we want to talk to Matanzas Inn and ask if they would be able to improve and expand their facilities, or maybe we expand opening it up to other concessionaires and see what they will be able to provide. But there's a need, and we need to improve our facilities, and we need to expand the facilities. So we're just bringing that to your attention.
We already own Virginia, though, right?
Yes, Virginia's a street.
We own that now.
Correct. That's a
Okay.
street right away.
Mark, I don't know if you're going to go away from that subject at this point.
Okay.
But if you are, I think an important point to mention to the council is that based on our back of the envelope calculations of the current revenue streams, we believe that if we took the money that we were currently paying Matanzas and plowed that into our own facility, that it would pay for itself, and depending on where we did it and whether land was involved or not, somewhere in less than 3 years. there's a financial way to pursue that if the council were inclined to move in that direction.
And while we're still on that subject, I might also add that there are grants available specifically for this type of amenities and access. The grant available are for larger vessels, and the spaces available for larger vessels is reducing while the number of larger vessels is getting larger. So there's grants available to provide facilities like these that would include building vertical construction of restrooms, laundry facilities, that type of thing.
Mark, have you given this presentation to the Anchorage Advisory Committee yet?
Nope, you guys are the first.
Okay.
Discussed it informally, but without him present.
Correct. That's what led to this.
Okay.
Right, just
They're aware.
From our work session, I remember.
Right.
Go ahead.
So also from the discussions last month, it was said that there was confusion on the definitions. So I just wanted to bring those up. So for the definitions, there's different things. So an anchorage, what if you said an anchorage to a boater or to the permitting agency, an anchorage is an area that there could be a submerged land lease or it could be privately owned bottoms, but it's an area where a municipality or a private marina has control over those bottom lands, and they're inviting people to come there, but you need to abide by their rules. But it's open to the public. You don't have to check in with the harbor master, or there's no check-in, there's no fees required, but there's also no services provided. But it's just an area that says, here's the boundary of this area. We invite you to come in. It's free of cost, but we have rules. You can't damage the environment. You have to pump out your sewage. You can't throw trash overboard. Different things that you have to follow, just like the harbor management plan, but there's no cost to it. A mooring field is similar, but we've got permanently installed anchors. You have to check into the marina or it's with the harbor master to be assigned the ball. We are providing services there, and we still have to follow the rules of the management plan. So those two things are different. Both of them are places where boats can go to anchor and stay and for extended periods, but they are different. Then the idea of the special anchorage area, that is a federal designation. It was enacted a long time ago, and there are special anchorage areas all over the country, not just in Florida, but all over the country. Here in Florida, there are some examples of the anchorage areas here in Florida, or the special anchorage areas. There's St. John's River, Sebastian, Vero Beach. There's one down in Marco Island. Not all of those are mooring fields. Some of them are anchorage areas that have this special anchorage area designation. Some of them are anchorages, some of them are mooring fields. So that designation can be applied to either or. We have been, let me go follow the slides here before I get out of step. So the picture up in the right-hand corner is in Stewart. It is a mooring field, and it has this special anchorage area designation from the federal government. So what that does for you is, this is a nautical chart. It's produced by NOAA, and in the red circle, it may be hard to see from your angle, but there is a box showing where the perimeter of the mooring field is. This box and the note that says what that is in the Federal Code of Regulations. So if you looked up online in the federal government, you'll see the description of that mooring field. But it's also on every single chart, every paper chart, every electronic chart. If I pull my electronic chart up on my phone, it's on my phone that says, hey, here's a mooring field here. So what you're getting by getting that designation is really worldwide advertisement if people are looking into coming to this area, hey, there's a mooring field here, Matanzas Pass mooring field, Matanzas Harbor mooring field is, and it'll be on those charts. That's what I see as the biggest advantage of pursuing this Anchorage area designation. The other smaller advantage it has is while the boats are on hook at night, they don't have to burn an anchor light. Because it's on the charts, the boaters know where that area is, and they don't have to burn an anchor light. So that's another small advantage for the boaters.
I mean, provide some protection from competing use.
Well, if you have that on the chart, and the boat's coming into that area, and someone else might have another mooring field or a place for the boat to go, but it isn't on that, then when the boat's coming into harbor, they're going there to that destination. So it may not.
It's preferred, obviously, and then preferred.
Right. If you're planning your trip from your house and you have that as the option that's obvious, then that may be the place where more people end up.
I was going to ask you this question, but maybe now's the time. When people come in to get on a ball, do they make advance reservations and then come in and tie up and then go in and check in by dinghy? How does that process work?
Chelsea, can you answer that? She's more in the operations side.
Chelsea O'Reilly, Public Works Manager. What's supposed to happen is that they're supposed to, when they enter the field, we have 2 signs, and they're supposed to call into the office, and Matanzas is to assign on a ball then. That doesn't necessarily happen all the time, and so they do tie up, dinghy in, and then go to Matanzas to receive their assignment. We have had some issues, but with the additional patrols with the sheriff's office and Austin and the beach, part of the beach team out there on the field, we were able to enforce it more.
Can they make reservations?
They can, it's a first come, first serve, so and we're required to do that with the state with the submerged land lease. There is the potential of doing reservations and calling ahead, but again, like I said, if they get there and we don't have any balls, it is a first come, first serve, and that's part of our requirement.
So I wanted to bring to everybody's attention that we have been working towards a designation for an Anchorage area for our mooring field since its inception. The council back in 2004 said, hey, we want to become a special Anchorage area. So they directed staff to pursue that. All the applications were filled out and sent to Miami. That's who would handle that. There was a gentleman there at the time. His name was Joe Embrus. He handled all that paperwork for us. There were hoops that we had to jump through. If you're out in the mooring field and you see the yellow spar buoys around the perimeter, those were a requirement to do this. We didn't have them in the original plan. They said, well, if you want to become designated as an Anchorage area, you'll have to do A, B, C, and D. We had to modify the mooring field from its original design to give that more a buffer from the federal channel. We did that. We put in the special purpose buoys. We jumped through every hoop that the Coast Guard asked us to do to receive that designation. At the end of that, and it took about 2 years, in 2006, we corresponded with Joe, and he said, we believe you've met every criteria to become an Anchorage area designation. We just need to finalize our paperwork. So that sat with the Coast Guard for a while. Then the council changed, town staff changed. It no longer became a priority. It sat on the back burner until 2015 when it was brought back up. we went back to the Coast Guard and said, hey, whatever happened to our designation? Joe had retired. The new person that replaced Joe didn't have any records of it. We provided him all the records of it. We've still been working on it. Up until last year, the person that's in charge of that now picked up the phone, called our office and said, yeah, we had a conversation with St. Pete sector, and because you're so close to the federal channel, we're not going to be able to give you a special area designation. I said, excuse me? And he explained it again. I said, well, can you please put that in writing and send that to us? He said, sure, I can put that in writing. I said, well, beyond that, here's the other mooring fields in Florida, and they're even closer to the federal channel than we are, and they have that designation. So your argument doesn't jive. And if St. Pete sector said this, can we meet with St. Pete sector to have the conversation with them, and can we get something in writing from them? Crickets since that conversation.
Oh, that's
So
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And I talked to him on the phone myself. I was upset because this has taken this long to do it. We were already verbally granted that we had concluded the process. So we're looking for direction from the town on where to go next. He's never provided anything in writing.
St. Pete sector, evidently.
Well, I think we have to go to Miami because Miami is the one that's in charge. He's blaming St. Pete, but nobody in St. Pete, we haven't gotten anything in writing. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't think there's any doubt it needs to be resolved, Mark.
I would agree, but before we go pursue that, I would like the town to give us some direction on what they would like to do.
So when you were talking to this person, where was he? Who was he?
His name is Gene Sutton, and he is a civilian. He works for the Coast Guard, and he's in Miami, and he oversees the reviewing of permits for that division in Miami.
I was just wondering if you could go to the local Coast Guard station and ask them for some guidance as to how we fix this problem.
Well, we did have a meeting with the local Coast Guard, and Gene from Miami came over, and we met with West Coast and the Navigation District, with the local Coast Guard people, and Miami, I believe St. Pete came down for the meeting too. Town representatives, Austin was in the meeting, and we all sat around the table and discussed what the benefits would be and if there were any hurdles to get through this process for the special Anchorage area. And at the end of the meeting, there were no apparent reasons why it wasn't going to go through. I fully expected Gene to go back to his office and come back with, we're preparing the final paperwork.
I agree with you that
Yeah,
they go to whoever you think, Miami, and then I would also maybe contact Francis Rooney and see what he can do to help. Say, look, we've had this bottleneck, we're going to try to resolve it, but we want to give you a heads up, and you may have to run some interference for us.
I think that's where it is, and I think the answers we're getting verbally aren't being recorded on paper. There's probably a reason. I think it's just, let's kick the can down the road.
Right?
So you have a file of everything that was submitted the last time in 2000, whatever it was.
Yes.
And you were right next to being approved.
Right there.
And for some unknown reason, that's why you never stop when you're in this permitting process. You just keep going. But for whatever reason, it stopped, and then it all went away.
I guess they didn't want to change the maps.
Well, it seems to me that
At the very least, we need to get something in writing that gives us a reason if that is indeed what it is.
right. And who does this fellow report to? The one that's giving you a hard time in Miami now?
Well, he's a civilian, so he would report to the the district commander of the Coast Guard, and I'm not certain of the name of that person.
Maybe he ought to be contacted too, you know.
Well, we're looking for direction on how to proceed with that. I don't want to go contact the district commander without backup from the town.
So what's our legal guy say over there from the East Coast? You got any ideas on this?
I think that the plan is, that you're discussing is the appropriate one. I do think.
John, please.
I'm sorry.
There you
I
go.
do think that the suggestion, the council member that you contact your local federal representatives is also appropriate. That's what they're there for, is to help and bring those issues to the attention of the federal agencies that their constituents have an issue and a concern. I've been tangentially involved in a similar process in another jurisdiction.
Tangentially.
Yeah, I don't.
$2 word.
Because the consultant in staff has handled it, and it went smoothly. And so I'm somewhat as surprised that it just kind of fell off the face of the planet, and all of a sudden you're getting a response from the new guy saying, "Oh no, we can't do it," with no further explanation.
I'd say Rooney too, because he's a sailor, and this used to be his own port. So
Does anybody have any objection to pursuing this with all force necessary, including a letter to Representative Rooney?
I'm not sure all force necessary. That could
yeah.
really escalate.
Something tangentially appropriate.
Send our Navy out after him.
Madam Mayor, so, everything takes authorization and allocation. So when we use mark, we typically use mark associated with a physical improvement, because the cost of his services are part of the process of the physical improvement. He acts as our engineer on that particular project. So this activity is administrative. So I just want to be clear that this would be something that you can authorize him to pursue, and we can spend town money on it. It's nothing fine. But today, I think what he's looking for is authorization, and Chelsea and I are looking for the council's commitment to spend money on this effort.
I think there's a consensus.
Yes, I think we can move on from it. Okay, so it's
So-
yes, tangentially and otherwise.
So can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
So what's the plan then? Is the plan to take one more run at this guy in Miami before we start leapfrogging him to the other uppity-ups, or what?
I think that's the most appropriate plan, is to formally send him a written correspondence, asking him to respond in a written correspondence. If he responds with, "Hey, we can't do it," then we can take that and proceed on up the food chain.
Well, there's a possibility that he may come around, and it would save a lot of everybody's time. And, once, as good as that is, getting Francis Rooney involved, but that opens up a whole new can of worms, I mean, then it's going everywhere after that. But
I wouldn't wait too long. I mean, it could go another 10 years. I mean,
Yeah, I think the secret to that, councilors, is the famous carbon copies. So you send it to that person, but you send the next two people in the chain as a carbon copy. So the person kind of knows that if they don't move it forward, that you're going to pursue it with the two people in the carbon copy chain.
Okay, let's move on, Mark.
Okay.
one other question.
Sure.
If you think about this, and you're making this application for the special Anchorage, would it just be for the current existing fields, or would you prefer to have it for the new fields as well, if we were to get them? Or is it just better off just to go for what we've got and forget the other idea in terms of having it on a map?
Well, I think that would be up for discussion. So the fields that are east of the bridge, the east and west fields, those are much more protected. Everybody's aware that those are there. The field that's west of the bridge is kind of more in open water, so to speak, and it's next to that channel as people are approaching the bridge. One of the benefits of this Anchorage areas, you don't have to burn an anchor light. So that we can discuss how we would want to proceed with that, but I would say for sure the east and west field, I don't see any issues. If you're out on the harbor at night, all the lights around the perimeter, the mooring field's lit up, you can navigate in the darkest of nights.
Fine.
With
I
no
just
moon.
didn't want to see step one, then we stop because, well, we want to get the special field.
Sure.
So just go for what we got.
And if we thought that that was the case, even if we move forward and we did get it in a short period of time, we could always go back and modify it to include the other area if that's what everybody felt needed to be done.
Okay,
The big idea is to get it on the charts.
yes.
And if that was on the charts, would it matter if the other one was on the charts? I don't think that it would.
What's next, Mark?
Bayside Park. Fountain Park. I don't know exactly what the right name is. There's no fountain there anymore, so maybe Bayside Park's more appropriate. So I understand that a gentleman came in and spoke to council about ideas over here at the park. So the pictures up there are what the park looks like right now. It needs some work. The seawall needs a little rehabilitation. But the staff just submitted another grant application to get some funding for repairs to the seawall and to add a marginal dock. And a marginal dock is a dock that just runs parallel to the seawall, right up against the seawall. And we've got 63 feet of waterfront there. So it's 63 feet wide. If we use a marginal dock, we don't have setbacks, and we could go basically from property line to property line with that marginal dock. But if we did a perpendicular pier from the seawall, then there are setbacks by the DEP rule and by the town's code. And those setbacks are 25 feet on either side. So if you take 63 feet and you subtract 25 on one side and 25 on the other side, we're left with 13 feet in the middle.
Yep.
So if we put a dock in there, and the dock, I wouldn't want to make any less than 6 feet wide for a floating dock, for stability reasons. You take 6 feet off of that, you're left with 7, and that's not, the dinghies are longer than 7 if we're tying off bow end. So there's not a lot of room there for that. But there may be room for negotiation with one of the next door properties. We could get a waiver of the 25-foot offset. Maybe there's some give and take to work with them if we wanted to do a perpendicular dock. And then the conversation of the ferry service would also come into play. Their boat is 14-foot beam. So, and it's 40 feet long. So it's rather large. We think that we can make it work, but we're at a 30,000 foot level looking down at the big picture. Is it something that we want to pursue? Is that a good idea? Is that the direction that the town wants to go?
Let me ask you a question about
What
that.
just happened?
So we own that area, that fountain or Bayside area, that's ours. So what about that as a harbor place?
It is really small.
How small, how big is it?
And
5 feet wide.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Bruce is asking, what about using Fountain Park as a harbor, as a resource for the harbor?
Just my opinion, that's prime
That's
real estate
exactly.
right downtown that probably has bigger and higher uses, even just as an open space for the public, to put a harbor.
I'd leave it open, raise it.
Oh. The only,
I'm not talking about the dockage, I'm just talking about this.
but what would be the advantage of having the harbor's master's office there? It's on the other side of the bridge. He wouldn't be able to see the mooring field. He would have access by water to come over there, but the visual advantage there isn't like at Virginia where you would be able to look both ways and see every ball.
All at night, you think,
Can you see every ball at night?
from Virginia?
From
From
Virginia?
Virginia.
It depends on how bright the moon is.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't see the utility of seeing every ball. I'd see that it would be nice to have it, but I don't know. I'm just thinking from a facility standpoint, people are going to be coming into the town. I don't know. That's just a thought.
Joanne?
How does the fact that the town has the easement, the entire easement in front of Nervous Nellies, the entire length there, come into play? The town has that entire dockage. It's not open right now. If we do a marginal dock in front of Bayfront Square that's 63 feet long, it would connect also to the entire dock in front of Nervous Nellies, and then that does that take you all the way to the Dinghy Dock then? Is there any interruption?
Yes, we could do that. Yes, we can make
Okay.
a
So
fix.
then you've got a very long area for both. You can identify some number of feet of that would be for if we're going to have a taxi service or we're allowing someone to have that 43-foot boat or whatever length you said. And then you still have dinghy area. I mean, it seems to me that we've got a far longer, I didn't bring that distance in with me, but it's a long distance there. That's got to be another 120 feet at least and more all the way to the dinghy dock. Do you
Right,
have
so
that?
if you look at the picture there, what you're talking about is it would go from the Fountain Park or Bayfront. Is it Bayfront or Bayside?
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
It would go all the way in front of Nervous Nellies and underneath the bridge all the way over to the Matanzas dock. You could have a fixed timber boardwalk that would be connective and people could walk that stretch.
Now, right now, that easement is fenced off, and you actually can't get there from Bayfront Square, Bayside Square. So that would have to be, the fence would have to be changed, so it's on the other side of the easement. And
Correct.
And that you access it from Bayfront Square and use that whole distance right now.
Yes.
Because sometimes actually there are commercial tables and chairs on that right now, and in reality, that's supposed to be a public dockage easement.
That is correct, yes.
So that creates a whole other opportunity there for a
It
long
does.
length.
And let me say that either option, we could build that fixed timber connectivity there and then put the floating dock in front of that, whether it's parallel to the seawall or perpendicular to seawall, we could still incorporate that connectivity with the boardwalk.
Good. Anything else, Joanne? Roxanne, any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so the last slide is just to leave you with some thought. What's strategic planning wise? What does the town see 5 years, 10 years, and into the future? What do you see your mooring field looking like and the waterfront for the town? Like I said at the beginning, this is a tremendous feature that the town has. There are very, very few places anywhere that has what you have here. I think you should really try and take advantage of it by improving it and maybe expanding the mooring field. I think definitely improving the amenities will attract nicer cruising clubs, and there'll be more of an attraction to come here if the facilities were improved. We already talked about what are the different ways we could go to Matanzas Inn and ask them to expand and upgrade. We could,
Mark, hold on a second.
yes.
Roger, how much is it going to cost us to expand the mooring field? Any idea, rough idea? Back of the envelope tangential number?
Well, Mark
you-
probably has a better number of the cost of the mooring.
Just a rough number.
And the engineering, because that's
Okay.
really what our cost is.
So it's going to depend on how much.
The
of
maximum expansion.
How much per ball?
It's probably on the order of 2,500 to 3,000 to get the thing installed and turnkey after it's in the ground.
And
That's for
maximum number of balls, how many do you think there would be?
that.
15?
25.
Yeah, it could be on the order of 25, depends on
Okay.
what
Okay, so
size.
is there a consensus of the council that we're looking to expand the mooring field? I personally think it's an excellent idea.
Yes, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Joanne?
Yes.
Ray? Okay, so, yes, we're going to expand the mooring field.
And can I
Okay.
tell you that those of us who boat know that great places to stop and anchor are few and far between, and I think it'll be very popular.
Wonderful, okay. Plus, it's going to provide some other services to the town that, for aesthetic purposes and whatnot. Okay, next issue, there's one resolution.
Okay,
What's the next one?
so to the upland facilities.
Absolute-
We need to look at
Yeah, okay.
expanding and improving those.
So, there will for sure be pushback from Virginia on that, but that seems like a likely location. Joanne, what are your thoughts on that?
I would love the town to take that in-house. I have serious reservations about Virginia and that commercial intrusion into that neighborhood. And is that actually a building lot there, or is that just the extension of the street right-of-way?
Right away.
Right away.
I have concerns about that.
Yeah, I
But-
do
and-
too. I do too. But we recognize that's an issue. Anybody else have a comment on Virginia? And Mark, you know, you and I had a conversation a couple of years back about that lot in the back, and at the time I inquired, with someone about what it cost. I think it was right around $450,000, I think was that lot price in back of Town Hall. But what is that water access? I mean, would that actually work? I mean, go ahead.
Yes, I think that the water access would work.
Okay.
If you acquired those properties,
Yep.
that we could improve the water access. So we
Okay.
could actually dig out a better basin that
Okay.
when you got to
Because
the
you
end
can't
of the canal,
hardly
it
see
would
it right
open
now.
up.
Right, okay. Rex, what were you going to
I
say?
have
something?
fewer reservations about using Virginia. A place where you can check in for a mooring field is not a restaurant. It's not a bar. I would mark it akin to, where you go to check in your RV, which is something I do. We go in, we're quiet, we check in, we then go to our spot. You don't hang out there except to do your laundry, and you're not noisy doing laundry. It's not the intrusion of another type of business. It's a quiet kind of location. It's at the very end of the canal, with the exception, I believe there's only one house on the Bayside of that lot. So I would like to continue looking at that. I'm not saying that I, have made up my mind for sure, but I wouldn't want to discard using that lot for that purpose. We own it. It would save the town a lot of money rather than buying another piece of property.
I guess the real question, go ahead, Mark.
I would like to add that you don't have to have there wouldn't be parking there for one thing. So, and there's no restaurants or facilities down there. You wouldn't even have to have your restrooms and laundry at that facility. It could just be a place for the dockmaster to oversee the everything and you could have elevated building with storage underneath, and you could have dock space where you could run the check-in, just like Rexanne is saying, the people could come into the dock, check in, and then go back out, but it's not somewhere that they're going to get off and go anywhere.
How are we then improving our upland facilities?
Well, that would be one check off the checklist. You have a harbor master's office that you'd have a good vantage point from. You'd have a place to keep the pump out boat, which that's being kept at Matanzas Inn right now.
You want us to do both, town location and Virginia.
Well, that's an option.
It sounds like your preferred option to me right this second. Okay,
I think it would all work from behind the town.
yep.
I don't think there's any reason why everything couldn't be behind the town, and that would probably be the cleanest and easiest way to go. But just for conversation purposes, it doesn't have to be a disruptive to the neighborhood down there. And at the end of that street, I'm not for certain, but a good portion of the end of that street is a hotel motel, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ask you this, why do you have to have a harbor master to begin with? With all the electronics today, why does somebody have to physically come in and do something?
You haven't been out and spent any time in the mooring field, have you?
No.
Yeah.
There you go.
They're out there every day.
Yep.
Are they out there on the weekend too?
Oh, no, I'm saying that wrong. You didn't bad question. why do you have to have someone physically go and sign up rather than sign up
Oh,
electronically?
okay,
Not, that's what I meant.
okay. Not physically have a person out there in the
Right,
morning
right,
field.
right.
Yes, yes, yes. So that could be an option. That there's requirements on the lease right now that they have to provide their insurance, but that could
That
be
was
done
discussed at the
electronically.
Anchorage Advisory Committee many times.
Yes, it was.
So you have to provide all that information.
You
But
got
it could
that
be-
on your phone, you go bang, bang.
Yeah,
could-
it could be provided electronically.
Good.
So I think that the town even discussed that at one point, is to trying to set that up electronically. So that's something that we could discuss and pursue as well.
Okay, so I think there's a consensus that we're gonna discuss possibilities to expand or improve the Upland facility. Whether it's Virginia, Matanzas, Town Hall, we'll discuss that, okay? Right, no. Well, because that's like, putting restroom facilities in the middle of Times Square. Yes, yeah, because it's a place where people meet and gather. Okay, Mark, what's next?
That's how I wanted to leave it, is
Okay.
just everybody's thinking about what's going to be happening next and where do you want to go?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, this is really food, all this stuff is food for thought for item E on your agenda today.
Yep, of course. Okay, well, at least we resolved a couple of things there on the expansion and the designation. So thank you anybody have any follow-up questions, Roxanne?
I just noticed on our agenda, it also says we're supposed to be discussing the newly acquired Bay Oaks parcel. Is that,
Also,
oh, no, that's the next section.
That's the next
I'm
item.
sorry. Bayside was the last one on this. Okay.
Anything else
I'm
for
sorry.
Mark? Mark, thanks, as always, you were fantastic.
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Chelsea, anything you want to add? All right, thank you guys very much. Anybody want to take a quick break, or you keep going?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay, so, Amy, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm telling her that so she turns off the mics. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the brief delay. The next item on our agenda is to discuss the Times Square design proposal. And Roger's not here.
This is why I got confused, because it says Bayside Fountain Park
Yeah.
again.
Okay. Chelsea, do you want to start talking about this? Thank you.
Chelsea O'Reilly, Public Works Manager. So what you have in front of you is the draft scope that we've received from DRMP regarding Times Square.
What does DRMP stand for?
Dyer, Riddle, Mills, and Record.
Okay, thank you. I know, it's a pet peeve of mine. Okay, go ahead, Chelsea.
So in this scope, it has included the Times Square Bayfront Park and the newly acquired Bay Oaks parcel. As you all discussed at a previous meeting, that you'd like to incorporate all three of those for the branding purpose. So we're just kind of looking for some comments, feedback, concerns, thoughts, ideas, and I'll turn it over to Roger if he'd like to add anything else to it.
Roger, would you like to add anything else to what Chelsea has just said?
Right, not that I'm speaking for or against the idea that Council Butcher mentioned in the prior item, but for example, if someone had a concept for Bayside Park other than sort of as a park, we would want to know that now so we can incorporate that into the design effort.
Okay.
For example.
Okay.
So,
well, let's just see what everybody says here.
so if you have any specific ideas, for example, such as when you look at Times Square, don't forget, we want to update the clock, for example. Okay. Or at the Bay Oaks parcel, we do want to make it a drive-through entrance to the park, or we don't want to make it a drive-through entrance to the park, or anything like that would have to be sort of incorporated into the design review that the council feels very strongly about, that there's a consensus for today. We'd like to know that.
Okay, let's start with the Bay Oaks parcel. I had just assumed it would be a drive-through entrance to Bay Oaks. Did anybody else make that assumption, and is it important? You did not? Okay, do you think it shouldn't be? Bruce, turn your microphone on, or get closer to it.
Hello,
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not even dream of it being a drive-in entrance.
Okay.
Just because of the congestion of turning left and right and on Estera Boulevard, it's just one more area of conflict. I thought it was going to be a pedestrian gateway, ride your bicycle into it, and that sort of thing. I just never even thought about it.
Okay. Ray, had you thought about it at all? I'm going to listen for a couple minutes. Okay. Roxanne, had you given it any thought?
I assumed it was going to be a drive-in entrance. One of the things that I know that Borcab and others have cried about for years is that no one knows the park is back there because there's no direct way in. And so I assumed it was going to be a way to drive into the park. I don't think it would cause any more it's not going to cause any more congestion than we have now. They'd just be turning at a different place rather than at School Street or.
Let me ask you further. Do you think it should be a drive-in entrance to Bay Oaks?
I believe if we can do it in a way that it increases the visibility so that it helps people know that that's where Bay Oaks is. That's what I thought was the whole idea of even acquiring the parcel, was that it gave us presence on Estero Avenue or Estero Boulevard.
I agree. Joanne?
I guess I was having a higher aspiration for that piece of property.
Okay.
I'm looking at it when I think about the heart of the island and the vision for the comp plan, that how do you make that a special place? Now, in the comp plan, they just talk about trees on School Street, a palm-lined boulevard or something, but to me, that piece of property could be informational too, that you come and there's a kiosk or something that talks about all the assets that are right there. You arrive there perhaps by trolley or whatever, and then you look and you see there's the historic thing, there's Matanzas Pass, there's whatever. So I see it, maybe you drive in, maybe you don't, but I do have a higher aspiration for that and if we're doing that big sun thing at Times Square area and maybe we'll do something at Bayfront Square, then we would also repeat that down there, and that seems to me to be the spot to do that. So I did have a little higher aspiration for that.
How wide is the lot?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I assume it's a standard, standard width there. But I think what I'm hearing, so here's where your discussion falls into the item before you. Right now, we're calling for, I believe it's 3 design concepts. So if you're one is consider further a drive-in concept versus a non-driving concept, so you tell us that today, and then we go back and we tell the guy, well, maybe we want 3 concepts for a drive-in and 3 concepts for a not drive-in, and that's would be an expansion of the scope that we would then negotiate. So that's how we work through the issues today.
I don't think there needs to be 3 drive-in options, but maybe there is a drive-in option, a higher aspirational option, which I get what Joanne's saying, because that's making me think about not just the entrance. I want us to stop thinking of Bay Oaks as it is right now and think of it in a broader sense, because how does that whole area function for the people who live here 50 years from now? My guess is it doesn't function like it functions right now. And so from that point of view, that aspirational view of that property is probably a smart way to look at it, because you're looking at it in a much broader context.
Probably one more, excuse me.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
There's probably one more, maybe a combination of the 2,
Yeah, could
maybe
be.
maybe that's an option.
So am I hearing that you think 3 concepts are still be adequate for there?
Roxanne, you're waiting to speak. Oh, wait, let me.
Could we have that be an entrance and have people exit via School Street? That way the width wouldn't be as much of an issue. But it would still give us that presence on Estero. This is where you enter Bay Oaks.
The other thing you have to think about is the impact on the parking lot too, as it comes in if you drive in. But that's an out-of-the-box thinking one way in, yeah.
And we own that narrow strip right next to it where people do walk in right now. So when you combine them, it's going to be even wider than the lot. We shouldn't be just thinking of the width of the lot, because we own.
Anybody ever, when you drive up, I guess it's Summerlin, and you're heading toward Barbara B. Mann, and on the right-hand side, there's that dental place?
Yeah.
And it's got the big Jeep coming out with the shark and
Yes.
I always think of, I wish we had something that made you go, wow, I want to go in there. It makes me almost want to go to that dentist.
But it's because it's for kids.
Yeah.
And that's another good point, though. 50 years from now, let's forget about 50, 20 years from now, is that area being utilized by children? Or I think about people who are moving here right now, their children are in college. They don't have small children. And I just think it's something to think about in a broad sense, but. Okay.
So maybe you put a little children's park there.
Could be.
With the walkway into Bay Oaks. So you see right there, boom, there's a park there. There's teeter-totters and stuff. Anyhow.
There will always be grandchildren.
It's true. Okay, Roger, so yep, 3 designs is probably a good idea. All right, and
And to that end, make sure then that they look at like goal 3 in the comp plan and those objectives that are all objective 3A and policies 3A1 through 3A4, just to give them just that thought process of what the heart of the island was. Thanks.
okay, so what other issues do you want us to resolve, Roger?
Okay, so we talked about the Bay Oaks parcel. Is there anything further conversation on the Bayside Fountain Park parcel?
I would love to see us incorporate more of a kayak-friendly area. We are on the kayak, what is it called, the Blue Way?
Bayside Park?
Yeah, at Bayside Park. There's so many, I know people say there aren't enough places to park a boat, but there's even fewer places I feel safe pulling up my kayak because there are so many boats around.
Oh, not to launch a kayak, just to
No,
be able
to be able,
come-
if I was kayaking and I wanted to jump off and buy a drink at a vendor
Yeah,
on that street, it would be nice if I could tie up my kayak there.
okay.
Didn't you use the Dinghy Dock?
Not from judging from that picture. It should be mowed over in a minute.
town sticker.
Okay, so kayak resources, anything else, Joanne? I mean,
Well,
Roxanne? Or Joanne?
Joanne, go ahead.
Well, I'm assuming for the Bayside parcel, that they'll get a chance to look at the things that Crab already talked about, whatever, as well, just for some thoughts. Because I know there had been talk about, whether there would be Veterans Memorial there of some sort, whether it be just our history in the war, different things like that. And then if we're doing 3 concepts, maybe one of those concepts should be the harbor master thing that Bruce, that you talked about and that the town talked about as an option. Use one of those that way and use the other 2 options in another way.
Yeah. I think there ought to be some shade there. And
Shade is important wherever possible.
yeah. And I hate to say wait till after the strategy meeting, but this branding thing is super important to me.
Me too.
And we have to get this branding thing understood and incorporated. And I wasn't really a fan of the sun idea initially, but I've changed my tune. I'm really leaning towards sun, and with sun comes beach umbrellas that I've heard Joanne speak of before, and beach balls, but I'm big on the beach umbrella idea now. So sun emblem with the beach umbrella, and incorporating that somehow in all these things that we do.
Throw something out about branding. I'd like part of our branding not just to be an aesthetic visually, but that we become a zero tolerance crime community. And talk about how we can have not just a prettier town, but a safer town. And part of our brand has always been, we're a family island. Well, we're a family island. If we are a family island, we need to step up our game, because there are some unfamily occurrences going on. And I think that's an important thing to talk about during our branding. But anything else, Bruce? Ray, your comments about Bayfront
Bayside.
Park?
Yes. Seemed to be a lot of consensus today about the dockage going up along the seawall there with the other idea. I think that's a great idea. But I don't want to discount that proposal that was going to come in from the Cape Coral people. I'd still like to get that and see what they have in mind.
Right, so just to help you understand where we are with that, based on the conversations we had with Mr. Kincaid, he's going to physically go there and look at their boats and their vessels and talk to their captains about how they would operate, how he feels that he might be able to fit them on that site, and whether that would be satisfactory to them, whether it would just be a drop-off point versus leaving the boat there for 4 or 5 hours during the day, so a lot of those types of logistics. So to see if he can work within the physical constraints that we have there, because I think they didn't realize that we only have 13 feet to work with.
So
But he's going to go meet with them and inspect the vessels and have that discussion with them is the next step.
the perpendicular dock then is unlikely at this point.
There's some, I was
Constraints,
surprised,
yeah.
to be honest with you, when I had my conversation with Mark earlier in the week, that once you take back the 25-foot setbacks, how little room you have left to work with.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
the town could give the town itself an easement or a variance too, if we found that
Well, and
important.
the adjacent
We could tr-
property owners.
We could try to work, as he said, we could try to work with the adjacent property owners.
Yep.
We can try to lessen
only
our
benefit them.
setback, but I assume that's a couple of feet. It's not going to be 10 feet, or 20 feet.
Joanne, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, remember, unfortunately, the property to the west was granted a reduced setback
that's
in
right.
their development, which
That's right.
is
Yep.
an issue.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's for Rob Fowler project. Okay, anything else, Ray? No. I would just add that I think that from its inception, that park area was meant, if you think of the pier and that park, it's meant to kind of function as a mall, with anchors at either end. And I'd like to think that the Bayside Park ultimately would be more of a gathering place for people, where there are places to sit, where there's shade, maybe there's even some sort of expanded pavilion for music. It just, to me, that is another gathering place for the town, and that's what would be important to me. Okay, so you got direction on that, Roger, and now you want to know about Times Square, right? Okay, so
I'll tell you, just from our staff perspective, we
sir.
basically have one issue and sort of one issue only, and that is not to have the tile type surface.
couldn't agree more.
But, other than that, we're pretty much open to any great idea.
Remember those little blocks, those little square blocks? They're a nightmare. Okay, yep. And they didn't hold their color, and it's just been constant. Okay, Joanne, you want to start with Times Square? Anything?
Well, Times Square, a couple things come to mind. Of course, I keep saying that that's a beach access there and that we should be able to get some TDC help with that, and I don't want to drop that. It's an extension of Old San Carlos, just the way Hercules or any of the other streets go all the way to the beach, and it's probably the biggest use of the beach accesses. Secondly, you talked about the clock and the idea of rejoining the clock, and I love that idea because, first of all, it harkens to me that this is island time, and I would like to play off of island time, that you're on island time when you're here, number one. And number two, I could see that the inside of that clock actually could have some interesting painting that matches like our sun or something, or maybe, whatever. It might even be fun to repeat that clock in another place, like there and down at whatever, but the inside of the clock is painted different for the 3 different locations. And that's the iconic thing that you get your photo in front of, that you're on island time when you're here. So at any rate, that being said, the other thing that comes to mind is I know that the merchants talked about that they wanted to put awnings out instead of umbrellas. As an artist, I like the umbrellas. I love painting the umbrellas. And I'm not saying that I want them to change, but clearly that conversation probably needs to be had, whether that's a practical thing or not, and whether we would convert that. The way on Old San Carlos you have awnings, whether there would be awnings there. So maybe one of the concepts might have awnings. I don't know, only because the merchants requested it. It's just a thought.
Roxanne?
Gee, I love the island time idea. The only thing I'd say about the awnings is I'm guessing they're coming with that because it's so much easier when a storm is coming to reel in an awning than to gather 47 umbrellas.
Also, it gives them more square footage on the ground.
So I don't have a problem with the awning idea. I just love to see that area spruced up, and I'd love to see it connect more, like you were saying earlier, Anita, that it comes from the bay, goes up the street, and we need to put a beach access sign there to start laying the groundwork for our argument.
I'd add one more thing, only because, and Chelsea, you're the one, and I'm not sure if the whole town council is aware, when you, on your next trip to Bayfront Square, as you get under the pavilion that's there, the little pagoda or whatever, you go off to the left, there's a little square piece on the ground where there's this sort of rough surface. It's a palm tree, isn't it, right now? But it's a thing that you put down that's a little bit sandpapery-ish, shall I say, a textured paint, and it can be any shape or any color. And they were saying that can be used down any sidewalk, like you just overlay it right on the sidewalk. So maybe it would be turtles, maybe it would be whatever, but you could direct you, like if you follow these things down the sidewalk, it takes you to Bayfront Square. If you follow these things this way, it takes you to whatever. Chelsea, it was your idea, you found the material, but I don't want that to be forgotten, because that may be part of the Times Square thing and how it starts there and it follows in other parts of the community that you follow that. So, what's that called, Chelsea? What should we call it?
Textured
The
stuff.
shark bite? There's something that, yeah.
Okay, but anyway, I don't want to forget that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's textured asphalt, basically, is what it is.
Okay. All right, Ray, any comments? No. Bruce?
Talking Times Square now?
Yep. Bruce,
I'm just anxious to see some concepts. I'll just let
Okay.
it go.
So I'll just, I've spent half my life there, and I would eliminate all rope light and uplight the palm trees, or downlight somehow. I would light the palm trees differently. The rope light to me is, it doesn't look good. But I would light the palm trees. I think it's important to keep the wavy wall, but I would look for a way to break that wall and move that kiosk. I mean, I've brought this up many times, and move that kiosk so it breaks the wall if that kiosk is kind of, and so maybe so the wavy wall can be put in, put out, you know what I mean. And I definitely agree that the little pavers have to go, that we need some sort of different surfacing. I love the idea of a turtle or a pelican feet or something walking through. I think that's quite charming. And lighting benches. With all due respect, I do not like those green benches that are in there right now. They look out of place. I think there should be some uniform seating. I think that there should also be some uniform umbrella. And by that, I'm going to tell you just to think about La Ola, which has these big giant umbrellas, and then the cute market umbrellas. It's just a whole lot of visual clutter. It'd be nice to have some uniform, not that everybody has to have green umbrellas, you could have green, pink, whatever, but it'd be nice if we could have some uniformity to what was being used there in the space so that it gave you a better visual view. Signage, I think businesses need to clean up their signage, so signage is important in there. I think signage is also important from a public point of view. Once people are there, they come there because they feel like, oh, this is where I need to be, but then they don't know where to go. I noticed the trolley stop there, Roger, has audio. It plays recordings. Do you know this? Telling people when the next trolley stop is, when the next trolley's coming, how many people are visiting the island. It's kind of interesting, all the information that they give out there. And that shelter is hugely important. Like Bruce said, shade is really important. I've often thought, one year I was in Berlin, and there was a downtown area, I don't know where I was, but the downtown area, something pedestrian area, something like Times Square, and instead of umbrellas, everything was done with sunshades. you know, and it was beautiful to look at because it was all different colors, but they, you know what I mean by those sunshades?
Triangle things.
Exactly. And it just made for instead of your traditional awning, you just had all these different shapes and colors, and it was absolutely stunning. And they provide a lot of shade, which is the whole idea about doing that. So as the sunshades, I think, would be an interesting thing to think about as opposed to umbrellas and/or awnings. And I think that's all I have to add about Times Square.
Could I add something?
Sure.
So instead of those benches that you referred to,
Yep.
would you do the wavy wall benches in other areas?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
just to get
Could
that.
be something like that.
same
A
theme.
wavy. Yeah. Ray?
If you eliminate the pavers, which I'm all for, there's too much maintenance involved there, would you also eliminate them down Estera Boulevard as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
do-
'cause
and continue that,
those sidewalks, you weren't here, but those sidewalks, we've been talking about replacing those sidewalks, but we didn't want to jump the gun because the county's going to do that section at some point, and
Oh, yeah.
so we didn't want to spend the money if we didn't have to, but yeah.
Okay.
Roger?
So, so as we go to finalize the terms of the contract with the consultant for Phase 1, one of the items that we've incorporated into that, and is part of the information that's provided to you today, is the public participation component. And, you know, we intend to have a robust public participation component that's incorporated, not only working through the committee structure, but also just working with the public in general. So I just want you to be aware of that. That's being contemplated to be included. So on the surface, it may look like the price for the first phase of this concept design is a little higher than you might have anticipated, but the reason for that is because we've incorporated a significant public participation component, unless you tell us otherwise.
What about with the vendors or store owners down there?
That's part of the
That's
public
part of that?
participation
Okay.
component.
Roger, what is the timeline for this?
Well, based on your comments today, I didn't hear anything that would significantly change the scope of work that has been drafted. So I think we should be able to get it to council, if not at the next meeting, no later than the first meeting in May, but I would hope that we may even be able to get it there by the April 15th meeting. The contract. And then, of course, then he would start actually doing the work.
That's what I was asking about, the timeline
Well,
for the.
you know, that unfortunately, in terms of the timeline for him doing the work, I think the actual sort of in-office work is, you know, that we can schedule out pretty well. We can ask him for part of his scope to have a tentative schedule provided for that.
Yes,
So
please.
you'll see that with the contract. But, you know, once we start meeting with people, whether that's the merchants or whether that's committees, you know, when committees meet once a month and stuff like that, that can affect the schedule. Our goal would be to hopefully have this well enough defined so that we can begin to think about construction money.
Okay, excellent. Anything else on this, Roger? Anything else from the council? All right.
No,
well,
we want to try to facilitate getting this approval and moving this forward. We just didn't want to prepare an item, put it on the agenda, and then have all these discussions you all gave us today, and then have to go back and redraft. So-
Excellent, excellent, thank you. All right, the next item is,
Can I just mention
Joy,
one other thing?
please go
It
ahead.
harkens back to something that you talked about a long time ago, Roger, and I just wanted to mention it. You probably came up with Chelsea as well, and that is that concrete that's stamped, and that Times Square could look like a dock, you know what I mean? It would look like a pier. And the concept may be being that if you did that, whatever you do at Times Square might be repeated at Bayfront Square too, like, so that they tie together. I think that's
Yeah,
understood.
what I'm hearing, and, you know, is that we definitely want to have a design-themed connection between
Yes.
Bayside Park and Times Square in some fashion. And I don't know if that'll be in surface treatment. I don't know if that'll be in street feature. I don't know if that'll be in type of awning or
But a
type
connection.
of umbrella
Yep.
or something, or type of trash can, but some type of connection.
Oh, I'm glad you said trash cans. Wait, trash cans are super important. We have perhaps the most awful trash cans, and I look forward to the day when they are removed. They're just, I don't know why we have, they're just impossible to clean, and they always look, even after they've been cleaned. Trash cans are very important. Trash cans that can be cleaned easily and that are somewhat aesthetically pleasing. Yes, Roxanne?
Delray Beach has
Yep.
solar-powered compacting trash cans so that the staff doesn't have to empty them so often, and they're gorgeous.
Okay, we'll move on to the election date change. Mr. Herron?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Members of council. At your direction, we have looked into the language in your charter with respect to when the dates for your elections are, and more importantly, or just as importantly, terms of office. As I previously stated, under state law, the only thing that you can change legally in your charter without having to submit it to referendum is the date of your election. However, there is another section of state law that says if that change affects the term of office, it has to go through referendum. And unfortunately, because of the date that you would like to move it to, which is the proposed general election in November, you would affect the terms of office under your charter, and accordingly, to the extent that you want to move your election to that date, it would have to be submitted to referendum. And if you so direct us, we will begin the process of drafting that ordinance to get it approved by you all, so it gets put on the next ballot for voting as a referendum item.
Questions?
Yes. You lost me there. Why does it have to go to referendum?
Because Chapter 166.021.4 provides that nothing in Chapter 166 statutes is to be construed as permitting any changes in a special law or municipal charter that affects certain subject matters in your charter, including the term of elected officers.
Okay, so if you kept the terms the same,
Can't, unfortunately.
no. You guys aren't thinking out of the box. Tell me why you can't.
I would have to do the math, but off the top of my head, I think the only scenario where that could be done is where all the seats would be up for election at one time. And your charter has them staggered.
You just do it every November, and sometimes you're lucky, it's when the feds are doing theirs, and sometimes you're not. But it's consistent November. So you've halfway aligned with.
But for example, next March, instead of there being an election in March, there would be an election in November, which would extend my term and yours. That's the problem right there.
Well,
That is correct.
No, actually, the way,
don't think
as
so.
I've sort of done the mental math, if you will, is that if you went if there's an election in November that we could put the ballot item on, the charter item on, so that you would change the
Is there an
term.
election this November?
That, I don't know that there is, but we need to.
Okay, yeah.
So then you have your election in March, and those people who are elected in March, their terms would go for 3 years and theoretically 6 months.
Happened once before.
Right, and then the way you control the two people who were recently elected, meaning a month or so ago, is that you put an item within the ballot language that says that they remain on council till they get replaced, which means their terms would theoretically get extended 6 months. So that's why you have to have the charter election to modify the charter to allow that. And then you have your regular elections then by ordinance fall on November dates.
Okay, so So what we need to do is simply decide whether or not this is something we wish to pursue. And if it is, then we need to construct the resolution for the referendum.
Ordinance.
Roxanne?
I'm in favor of doing this. I don't know how you can justify to the electorate that we waste money, over $25,000 every time we hold a special election.
You know, go ahead.
I think also that so many people are now voting by mail that the reason that it may have originally been placed in March is no longer valid.
Joanne?
I support saving money, obviously, and if, what will it cost to put the referendum on initially?
We've heard numbers that run from 25 to 35. I don't know, we haven't gotten a precise
100
number.
or 1,000?
1,000? To put it on, I'm sorry, what was your question? Did I misunderstand your
How
question?
much will it cost to do the referendum itself in
Oh,
November?
the referendum itself, if we do it on a pre-existing election, nothing.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking how
Yeah.
much the special election would be if we held our special election.
So,
Brady, were you going to say something?
Just wanted to ask a history question. How did we, because I had this conversation with Dan Hughes one time, and this happened after
It did.
we
They
were
didn't put it on
gone.
referendum, I think.
But
Wasn't
why
that
did it
Michelle?
go from November to March? What was the purpose of that?
Voting, population. Having
More people here?
Mhm.
That doesn't seem
But
very
it's also a
valid.
hassle. It's a total hassle to vote in March
Yeah,
because of traffic.
yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, but,
Yeah.
so,
Michelle, did you have some input on that for Ray? No. Okay. Bruce?
so is the plan to go to 4-year terms? I mean, is that what the referendum is for? Or is it to?
Referendum.
No, the initial need for the referendum is to deal with the fact that everyone's term expires in March and would need to be extended to November. So that means Council Murphy and Hasselhoff, theoretically, their term would be extended an extra 6 months, and the people who were elected in March, their term would be for 3.5 years as well.
Okay, so we're still going to have a November thing, but we're not always going to be coordinated with the feds.
It won't be, maybe a governor's election, maybe a senator's election, maybe the presidential election. So now,
Because the things will shift.
your question is a totally separate question, which is whether the term of office, to stay on a date where there's always a November election, that's something we have to talk to the supervisor election about, would that require modifying the term of office? That's a separate question that we have to look into. And
Yes, it
and
will.
if the answer is no, it doesn't, then you have this secondary question of whether you want to discuss modifying the term of office. But, so we have some work to do that in terms of the drafting that the town attorney alluded to earlier, authorizing him to spend time and energy doing that.
The term of office, when it says 3 years, does it identify what 3 years means? Does 3 years mean something less than 4 years?
Yes, if you interpret the way that I believe the language is and how it has been applied, there's two sections of the charter, section 5.02 and section 5.03, and should actually be reversed. Terms of all council seats shall be for 3 years, period. And then it has a language about how the initial council got elected to stagger the terms. And then it says, the term of a member of the council shall begin, which is mandatory, at the first council meeting following the general election. So your 3 years immediately starts to run from the date of the next meeting of the council after the election in which each council member was elected. And it runs until 3 years. And after those 3 years, then either you have to run for re-election, or in the case of that you've been on the council for a total of 6 years, then you're term limited.
Bruce, can you hold on one second? Joanne, what were you going to say?
I just happen to have the minutes from when ordinance 0106 passed, the charter amendment on elections, and you're going to laugh. Mayor Hughes began by reading the ordinance. He indicated that this rose out of a request by the Supervisor of Elections that she will no longer process their elections in the fall. The municipalities have
that's
met, and the consensus is that elections will be held every 4 years, and the original ordinance had it in odd number years. The other municipalities are going to even number years. This reflects that revision. So, Supervisor Elections. Now, my understanding is, though, that Sanibel is still in March, and they haven't decided yet whether they're going to switch or not. I'm just providing some information.
The last word I had from their city manager is they haven't taken, the council has not taken up the subject yet.
I just wanted to fill that in for you.
Okay, Bruce?
Didn't Cape Coral or somebody locally change theirs recently in Bonita? Was it Bonita that changed theirs without going to a primary, or without going to a referendum? Someone did, I'm sure. And there was some pushback from some people saying, "No, you're extending your terms," but they went ahead and did it anyhow.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how their charter reads, but I think the town attorney has shared his reading of it, and perhaps even an attorney general opinion regarding it. And I can tell you my reading of it is such that we need to adjust the charter language to comport to what the council intends to do prospectively.
So can you reiterate then? It would require us putting on the referendum, and it would also require, it would appear that those who are, the three of us who would expire in May would need to say that we're willing to serve till November if the people pass that referendum, and that the individuals just elected would be willing to serve 3.5 years rather than 3 years. Is that correct? Is that how it-
Conceptually, yes,
Yes.
if you don't otherwise adjust the terms, and the supervisor election confirms that for the unforeseeable future, that there'll be a federal election every 3 years.
I just want to make it clear in a small box what that means, and make sure that the council themselves is available to do that, were we to do that anyway.
That's if we had the referendum this November.
That's correct.
That's assuming we can have the
As
referendum.
opposed to having a referendum during our regular election cycle, which would be this coming March, which makes more sense to me, quite honestly. Roxanne?
Well, you.
It seems like that we're talking about this a lot, when the whole idea here is we just want to agree that we have a consensus for the attorney to spend some time looking into this further.
Yeah, you're right. You're right,
We
Smarty.
don't know all the
right, I'm
options.
turning off your microphone now. Okay, does anybody disagree? We're going to move on with this because it's a smart thing to do for the town.
Yeah, and to
Okay.
count, and I will
If you need
canvass the
anything from
other,
us,
the
yeah,
other
you can-
municipalities
You
to.
can come back to us.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. All right, the next item on the agenda is the proposed budget. Roger?
Okay, so a couple of things with that. One is that we, in our budget process, the way we envision our budget calendar is that at the May MP, we'll have a discussion of the budget, and in June, you'll set a tentative millage, and then we work on the budget over the summer, and you finalize the budget in September. You have 2 public hearings to finalize the budget in September. One of the things that could theoretically pose a challenge to the staff is that at the May M&P, you say, I want to, I'll use the example that came up earlier today, I want to fund bus benches, 12 bus shelters up and down the island.
Yep.
And we don't have the time to figure out the cost, or we don't have the time to figure out the impact on the millage, and we don't have, information from the county, what, if anything, they would charge us for maintenance. And so our purpose today is that if there are any initiatives or things that the council would like us to think about in terms of the upcoming budget, in terms of looking at the cost, the initial cost, the ongoing operational cost, the potential impact on the millage for plus or minus, to the extent that you have anything that you've been thinking about that we can,
Oh, Bob, would you speak at this
Yeah, the other
microphone,
podium.
please? Thank you.
that we have that information earlier than later, so we could begin to try to put some numbers to those items, so that when we bring it back and say, Council Butcher or Councilor Champ,
Yep.
here's the cost of your idea, here's what the potential impact is to the millage, this is what we think will cost us for operation and maintenance of that particular item.
All right, well, I'm going to go person by person here. Rexanne, any initiatives you wish to bring forward to the budget?
Well, I'm not sure if this impacts our budget or not, but I had mentioned the Connecticut Sidewalk. Now, I think originally we had funding through the MPO for that, but because we've changed plans on them, it's possible that maybe we don't, and I'd like that considered.
Could you follow up on that, Roger, because that is MPO.
Right, so we have received information from the MPO. We're responding to that with the council's new direction to expand the project the length of Connecticut. That requires a resolution, is the feedback that we've got since the decision to truncate it was a resolution. So we're preparing that for April 15th.
Thank you.
But your point, Counselor, is true. We don't know if
Right.
they're going to say the horses left the barn, and yeah, we'll be willing to incorporate it into our project, but the town may need to financially participate. We don't
Okay.
know the answer to that.
Well, then, make a little note of it.
I already have, thank you.
Second, it's, to my knowledge, the town owns a piece of property at the end of Amberjack, which is on the far south end of the island, which we are not using for a public purpose. And it sounds like I'm a broken record today talking about kayaks, but it seems to me that we could expend some town funds to make that a place for people to launch kayaks, dock kayaks, et cetera, et cetera. It would be not a lot of, what can I say? I'm searching for the word here. Traffic or
yeah.
infrastructure or anything of that nature.
Roxanne, when we talked about that, what was it about that Amberjack property? There was something weird about it. Joanne, do you
I
remember?
believe it's county, not town-owned.
We were told it
They
was.
went,
owned-
I thought they
we were
did the
told it-
research and they came back that it's
There
county.
was something weird
But-
about it.
Chelsea probably
Well,
knows.
if it's
Chelsea?
county-owned, then I would say we need to be lobbying the county to
Yeah.
do something with this piece of public land that we are not using.
My recollection was that it was investigated as being one of those park-type things, and the community came back and said, no, thank you.
Well, some of the community did. I'm part of the community, and I'm saying I would like to have a place to launch a kayak down there.
There's the
So-
beach.
Hmm?
I said, there's the beach. When you launch a kayak, what does that mean? That means you have to have parking for your car to launch the kayak?
Well, it's a pretty good distance from my house, so a few parking spaces would be nice. Yes.
Okay, so that's on your list, all right? Anything else, Roxanne?
I'm going to pause for right now.
Okay, Joanne?
And this may be road tax money, and we probably use it all up for downtown sidewalks, but I'd love to see sidewalks for the heart of the island on Bay Road, School Street. The kids there, the kids now have nice sidewalks coming to the school, and then they wind up walking in the street. When you get to Bay Oaks, you walk through the parking lot to even get to the rec center. So I would love to look at finishing the sidewalks in that core. At least on one side of the street.
Okay, anything else, Joanne?
Someone also talked to me about some tech visioning, and I don't know if we need some more tech money. I know that Crab is working on some tech stuff for the town, but they talked about there's a lot of tech people in town that are very knowledgeable, and that the town is trying to upgrade their public relations and outreach and some. So that was the other concept, is there a need for some money for tech in terms of public relations, outreach, things like that.
Ray?
I have a couple of things, just thinking. I don't know if this is the county or the town or where it would come under, but I'm real concerned about some of the crosswalks on the island, and I'm interested in getting some of those lit. I'm sure you've all discussed this before, but this is my first crack at it. So there are some in particular that just come to mind. The one down at by Islands End there, that's a relatively newer one. The one by
The outrigger.
the one, well, that's a good one too, the outrigger. The one by Santini Plaza where we've had 2 fatalities over the years, that comes to mind. And also the one by Albatross going over to Gullwing is particularly dangerous because I walk my dog there every night, and I've seen so many near misses. It's so poorly lit, and there's a lot of people coming from the hotels across the street to get to the sidewalk, to walk down to Santini, and it's perilous and it's frightening for me to watch every night. So I'm really interested in those reopening that discussion about how we go about funding some of those. I mean, I come through that one down at Docks every day down on Bonney Beach Road. That is a success. That is a real success. I mean, people are trained now. They come and they slow down, they stop, they let those people by, and it's constant there. I mean, people are coming and going all the time. That's one. The other thing I'm interested in is possibly some sort of recurring funding source for these groups that are helping us, that are doing all the heavy work on the water issues for us. And specifically, I'm talking about groups like Captains for Clean Water, Southwest Florida Watermen's Association, who we're going to hear from at the 15th meeting. And I don't know the mechanics of that and how that would work out, but I know they require funding, and I know they're getting funding from private sources, but they're doing the heavy lifting for all of us, and you're going to hear an earful of that on the 15th. But they're out there, and they're not just concerned about the fishing. I mean, that's certainly affects their livelihoods and everything else. But it goes right down the line. It goes down to real estate values, economic issues in our town, you know, and you can run it out 20 different ways how it affects us. So I'm interested in seeing these sort of organizations that are bona fide and getting some sort of funding. Now, whether that means us and the other municipalities kicking in and helping out, I don't know, but it's certainly worthy of discussion, and I'm interested in that.
Well said. I like that idea. Is it my turn?
It is, Bruce.
Excuse me. I didn't hit the button.
You didn't hit the button, but that's all right. The only one that it has is Rick San.
Just some comment on the lighting for you, Ray. When Rob with Lee County, we've been talking to him about this, or I have, for ever since I lived here. Yeah.
Yep. It's been quite a long time.
When they are engineering the Estera, they are supposedly at crosswalk locations putting conduit under a Estera so they can have crosswalk-specific lighting. Now, they're making the provisions for that. It doesn't mean what the end result's going to be, whether they'll do it or not, but at least it's coming in. And then we are doing a lighting study that MPO is doing. Do you want to say something?
Just on the crosswalk situation, they're doing that at their concept of where the crosswalk should be,
Right.
which may or may not sync with town council's concepts of where the crosswalk should be.
Right, but the safety committee is working on segments 5 and 6 now to give them their input on where the crosswalk should be down where you're talking about.
So it could change, the locations
Yeah,
could change.
so there could be some improvements there. But anyhow, and then the MPO paid for a lighting study that was not a very good result, in my opinion. And I talked to Don Scott, that's the head guy at the MPO, and I said, Don, saw a glimpse of that lighting study, and it was awful. He says, I agree 100%. He says, I refuse to pay him. So they're putting the screws to them to make it better, because it was awful.
On that, if I may, just, we're expecting the revised report in the next 30 to 60 days or so.
Great.
On
On street
locations?
lighting. On street lighting.
Street lighting.
Oh, street lighting.
Which should have included crosswalks, and they didn't say a damn thing in there. They didn't say anything in there about crosswalks, that I recall.
So, may I?
Sure.
So we won't really know locations for a while about where their proposed locations are for the crosswalks, or reshuffling of the existing?
Well, my conversation with the chairman of the Public Safety Committee was that, well, as you may recall, first of all, that there was a break in the Public Safety Committee where I guess we lost a quorum or whatever for a while, and they were just recently reconstituted in terms of getting people to volunteer and filling up that committee. My suggestion to the chairman of that committee was to look at different crosswalk styles, whether they're actuated by you crossing, whether you press a button, whatever, that are used throughout not only, the area, but the state even, and actually come back and say, at this location, we would like to see this style of crosswalk. And maybe every crosswalk doesn't get the exact same treatment. And then give that to the county to see what they're willing to do, maybe to do the whole thing, as you suggested, maybe they won't, we'll have to participate. And do that through that committee process to town council, to the county, and back again. So they've been actively, at least at their last, I want to say meeting, if not the last two meetings, they've been working very hard on that issue. So we're waiting for them to do that. Now, from a standpoint of budgeting purposes, which is our item here today, what we will do is we will say, okay, for the Rolls Royce of crosswalks, it costs this. For the Chevrolet of crosswalks, it costs that. How, do we want to put a half a dozen of each in the budget for purposes of either splitting the cost with the county or paying for additional ones that the county doesn't want to do or whatever?
Yes.
So we'll get to that. We'll get to that based on that process and the fact that the council today is identifying it as a priority.
I think it's a real priority. I mean,
Absolutely is.
we're trying to keep these people safe and keep them alive, and so I can't stress how important that one is, really.
Okay.
I agree with you. I wish we were doing this after the strategic planning meeting instead
We can do it
ahead of
again.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, again, what I always try to do is not create a situation where it's today's the last day, and
Right.
if you don't decide today, you have to forever hold your peace. We're doing this today because the M&P happened to be today, but we also have the strategic planning meeting next week, so it will dovetail into each other, and because something comes up at the strategic planning committee discussion next week, it won't be, well, too late, you didn't say it to us on the 4th, so you missed your opportunity. It's just
So
to
could
sort
you
of
just
get you
make
all
a
thinking.
point, Roger, of making sure that at the next work session that follows our strategic planning session, that we have another line item for proposed budget additions? That way, Bob, that we'll know after that, we'll be able to bring up some other things, confirm, deny. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, because I guess my point at this time would be, whatever the operational budget is versus the current millage, if there's any excess available, I say we reserve that for all these multitude of things we have, because we've got, I think, quite a bit of them. And then the other thing I would suggest, and this gets into future budgeting thinking, is the incremental tax revenue as a result of TPI for us for a period of 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, would be reserved for improvements to the beach in terms of I call them capital enhancements. And because I'm still unsure what Lee County is going to be able to do for us in terms of landscaping, the lighting of crosswalks, the lighting of the street, whether they're going to be able to, with P&L give us what it ought to be, or just this is what's our standard? And this could be a large amount of money to do it super nice rather than just standard. And I don't know I don't have a clue how much, but it could be a lot. And that's what my concern is.
Well, unfortunately, what I'm hearing is you all have a list of things that may come online before that. We start realizing whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So that's point A. Point B is that I hope I was clear, when I presented the prior budget, and that, we're funding things, at the current millage, not including new items. So when you start talking about new items, there's two things you have to look at. One is looking at our existing budget to see if there's opportunities to further streamline or reduce service levels, or increasing the millage. So just to set the tone, we don't have a printing machine in the back.
I disagree with that to the extent that you guys are sandbaggers and you're saving money left and right. Here's 120 grand you picked up here, and here's 40 grand you found over here. You're doing a good job.
I appreciate that, and we really do try to do it, and there will be a line, we hope there'll be a significant line item of carryover money that you could begin to apply to some of these things. But as I look at the list, and if they make the final cut, it's fairly substantial.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else, Bruce?
No, thank you.
Okay, I agree about, oh, Rexy, you pressed your button. I agree about having another repeat discussion on this after the strategic planning. But I'd also like to hit on Joanne's topic about technology. I think we are certainly trying to do something with our latest programs and whatnot, but in this day and age where everybody is grabbing their phone to search for something, I think we do. We need to improve our we need to improve our messaging. We need to improve our public outreach. We need to improve the ease and use of our website. We need to. All of that needs to be improved. If we're not telling our story, somebody else is, and it's important to always be, especially when it comes to this whole concept of branding. We need to be telling our story all the time. So that's super important to me. Roxanne?
I didn't say this during my section because I thought Bruce would bring it up and I wanted to let him do it. But I think another thing that needs to be considered in the budget is whether we can allocate money to helping the traffic situation. Bruce's suggestion of having additional officers, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. It would be extraordinarily expensive to continue that, but I think maybe we can look at some other ways of accomplishing the same goal without having officers there. It seems to have been, the theory has been proven that if we can keep people from crossing at places where there are not crosswalks, that that helps the traffic situation. So I think one thing we might look at in our budget is allocating some money to do some kind of landscaping or barriers that funnel people towards certain crosswalks.
Just to elaborate on that, Roger, I had a conversation with Mayor Ruane about the traffic experiment that we did. And on Sanibel, they use what they call traffic aides. These are not police people. These are individuals who are trained by the city of Sanibel to perform traffic moving tasks. And I think that we have, if ever there was a group of guys, I mean, we've got those guys here in Town Hall, and it might be an idea to look into that as opposed to the sheriff's deputies. Keeping in mind that Periwinkle is also a county road, and just like Estera Boulevard is, so hopefully we could figure out a way to follow a good suit there. That was just an FYI. Does anybody else have anything with the budget? Okay, Bob, do you have any?
I probably
Joanne?
should, I left it off because I thought you'd mentioned, I think you probably have it, but the bus shelters, I mean, they're talking $1,500 per shelter. If we want to say we'll do 2 this year and 2 next year, or, you know, whatever, I'm just, you know, that's what it's going to cost in our budget, but at any rate.
We really should be able to get MPO money for that. They have ways of getting money for public transportation.
Bob, is there anything that you need from us?
A couple of things, if I may.
Please, go ahead.
So what Bob is handing out is the snapshot
That's colorful.
for the end of February to give the council an update of where we are. And you'll see if you look at the second thing down on the left-hand column, basically where our expenses are running a little high is in community development and code compliance. And as we basically, this is not quite halfway through the fiscal year, but you can see we're running a little bit high there.
Yes, this is my first chance of speaking before some of the newer council members. But since Roger brought me aboard, I tried to find a way to provide a financial report to the councilors that doesn't require you to go through 40 pages and try to determine your own analysis of what you're reading. So by putting something together in a graphic form, if you look at just the graphs at first sight, let's say the first one on the left side that says general fund, right away you can see the red represents expenses that we've incurred through February. The green area portion is the revenues that we've received through the same period. The yellow is what we would be tracking at if we received 1/12 of those revenues and expenses, revenues during the year, and incurred the expenses at 1/12 each month. So you can see that there's no yellow at all under the green and red because we're above the trend at that point in time. So right now is the reason the green is so high is because our taxes come in the first 3 to 4 months of the year. Once we hit February, they start dwindling down. We have collected in excess of $2 million. We're looking at $2.6 million so far through February. So you'll see in each of the graphs, they represent the same concept so that you can always see that no matter what graph you're looking at, that the green would represent the revenues and the red would represent the expenses. There's explanations for why in some graphs that the revenues are below the expenses, and that's because in those particular activities or functions, those are reimbursements. We have to spend the money, for instance, TDC. We spend the money first, and then after we spend the money, we submit the backup data to Lee County, and then they submit a reimbursement to us. The other side is when you look at the stormwater, for instance, you see no red at all. That's because the stormwater fund is designed to collect the revenues to meet the debt obligations associated with the construction of the stormwater program. So it has just the opposite of what the TDC would have. Your revenues are coming in to be able to provide for those sources.
Those are good visuals, Bob.
You like these?
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. I thank you. And of course, your input is greatly appreciated as to what is important to you all to see as what's important to me to see.
Here's my input.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you do a forecast?
Well, I do a forecast when I look at these numbers as to whether we're ahead or whether we're below. Now, because a lot of our revenues are cyclical, you're going to you'll receive most of your revenues from taxes in the early part of the year, and then we'll continue to receive money from the state for the rest of the year, and the state will always be behind at least 1 month or 6 weeks for us to get it. So since the state revenue, such as sales tax and state revenue sharing, depends on how much money they collect as to how much gets distributed to us, I can't project that. I can use a general eyeball approach to it and give you a forecast in that sense. Same way with expenses. Our expenses are trailing right now when you look at the percentages. If we were on a straight line basis, we would all the departments would have spent at least 42%, and you'll see that most of them are under the 42%, which gives you an indication that the directors are monitoring their budgets very closely, and if it continues, they would stay within their budgets. There's a couple of them that are over, and those are the ones we will be watching to see if their trend is set to continue that away. And if it is, then the manager and I would be meeting, and he would be looking at a methodology by which to curtail that trend or come back and talk to the council about how that trend is important to continue. But this at least lets you know where we are at a given time. The bottom there, right in the center, in the black and white area, just gives you a status of where we are cash-wise and the investments that we have in the town's funds. And this is important because we do spend quite a bit of money anticipating receiving our reimbursements. And there are people that may come to you at some point in time and say, gee whiz, we look at this town and it looks like they've got a lot of money in the bank. How come we still need to raise taxes? Well, because we have to fund a lot of these major projects up front, they're $1 million, $2 million at a whop. And we've got to have cash flow to be able to cover that until such time we receive the reimbursements. The town manager has presented to you all in the past the FEMA took place, the IRMA rather, took place in September, October of 2017. And we have not received any money at this point. We have been told there's money's coming, and they have revised their processes. So we're in the awaiting area for all those monies to come in. Same token with TDC. We'll spend, let's say, $60,000, $80,000, $90,000 until we put the paperwork together, send it in to get reimbursed. When we look at the stormwater and the water projects, again, we'll spend $1 million, $600,000, $800,000, and we're waiting for the state to reimburse us. And that takes anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on what we encounter.
Yeah,
So-
but I want to be careful about that, because you use the word reimbursement. It's not really a reimbursement. All we're doing is we're transferring our thing from a payment to a loan. So we have debt service payments to make on that amount. We're fronting the money, we pay the contractor cashes his check, we submit that to the state. They give us the money back, but they're also booking a loan to us for that exact same amount, which we have to make debt service payments on. So I want to be very clear about that.
Okay.
Yes, and absolutely right, Mr. Hernsted. But during the meantime, the practical cash position is that cash is going out the door faster than cash is coming back in for those payment types. So we need to, fortunately, we do have the cash flow right now that's keeping us aloft, which is great. We're getting our reimbursements. We're timely with our requests for reimbursements. So we just want to bring you all into the understanding of how that flow works, because sometimes people kind of get a different impression of how much cash is available and how much isn't. So we watch it on a daily basis. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this report?
Anyone have any questions? Roxanne?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I want you to restate this. I find it shocking. If I heard you accurately, we have not received any reimbursements for Irma yet?
Correct.
That's correct.
Shocking.
That's something that needs to be emblazoned in the newspaper, that the feds haven't, and that's federal reimbursement,
Is there a
right?
reason?
Well, yes. Well, every time you hear that there's a budget issue going on in Washington. That affects the whole process. Every time you change governors and you have a new director of state emergency management, that you have a change of process. We are confident that we won't have what you call a disallowances, and that is when you you submit something to FEMA for reimbursement and they say we're not going to pay you. We have a high level of confidence that our reimbursement packages, notwithstanding the process, are compliant. So it's really a matter of time. Because we anticipated it would be a long time, we did not assume that money coming in at a particular date that we were going to use to balance our budget. So we didn't carry it as a due from other governments for budget balancing purposes. When we get that money, will in essence be a windfall, if you will, for the town. And that's where Councilor Butcher's point of the sandbagging of the money, then we'll have money, when that money comes in, we'll have some money to do some of the things on your list.
I'm not worried about our situation so much. I believe you have been acting very responsibly, but I just find it unacceptable. We talked about contacting Francis Rooney about something as trivial as a mooring field, yet they have gone this period of time without. I assumed that we'd gotten at least some partial reimbursement. To have received nothing in over a year and a half.
The other portion is, I will tell you, Councilor, and Hurricane Andrew, it took 7 years. So to what the jurisdiction I was working for till they got all their stuff resolved. And I think what happens also, unfortunately, is that the federal staff, if there's an event after your event, they get pulled off your event to go work on that event. And, and they circle back. So it is a lengthy process. The people who are having problem are the people who use that money, did not replenish their reserves, and or booked it as a receivable, and they didn't get it in on time, and now they're out of balance. We knew that because, relatively speaking, our claim was going to be small relative to some of the other folks who got damaged in Irma. We knew we weren't going to be a priority, and therefore we put ourselves financially on the timeline where yes, we need to get that money back, but no, it wasn't critical to balancing our budget.
This is a very unusual situation for any FEMA reimbursements, because usually within the year you have 50–60% of that. But this is very unusual, and with Michael hitting, as the town manager indicated, subsequently right after Irma, and it got devastated. The whole the town that got hit up in the Panhandle, they're not even a town anymore. So. Those are things that have had some effect on this process, but we wanted to kind of keep you all in the loop of it so that you weren't just going through the world not knowing what status of things are.
Thank you for that. Mr. Lang, Mr. Murphy has a question for you.
How much is that? How much is out there?
I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 400,000. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. Just to go to, I think it was Councilor Butcher's question. If you look at the left-hand column and you look at the total expenditures on the general fund, so the total general fund is running at 34% of expenditures. And if you straight line that would be, we would spend about 82% for the year. But there are activities that we do here seasonally, so we don't do certain things in season. So by way of example, if you look like at stormwater, is probably close to zero because we do all that work out of season. So now at the end of the day, it's our as I said earlier, it's our intention to do everything we can to be responsible with the town's money and to maximize our carryover from both the under expenditure part and the over realization of revenues, rather than be in a situation where we're short either revenues or we expend beyond what we've budgeted.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Lang?
One last thing.
Yes,
You all received this in your packet
impact
also.
fees,
That's just so that as you were looking at capital items or to consider or projects that are important to you, there's been a question raised as to how much money do we have in impact fees, and this is to let you know where we are as of right now, and that this board has approved $900,000 back in January for capital improvements for the downtown zoning district,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. So at one time, we talked about this having about $900,000 available, and you all have applied that for a project. So this is where you are at this point in time with those funds.
Roxanne?
These impact fees are being passed through to us from the county impact fee?
No, ma'am.
Which impact fees are these?
These are impact fees that we collect in our permitting process here in Town Hall. And there's a fee schedule that I also provided to you all that looks similar to this page here. And it shows the current fees that are being charged depending on the developer and the construction that's been taken, that's being incurred. So that share of money that's coming in, for instance, this year we have collected $6,000 in parks, and we've collected $34,000 for roads just this year based off of permits that we're issuing daily.
Okay, maybe I'm confused then. Do we get pass-through impact fees from the county?
No.
We don't.
These are, I ask that we review the impact fees for the town at this budget cycle or before or something, because do they make sense? I don't know whether they do or not. We've never reviewed them.
So the question of the impact fees is not something that you could say, well, okay, it was $20, let's make it 20. It's been a couple of years since we changed it, let's make it 25. It requires analysis of the impacts by a consultant to determine if you want to adjust your rates. And my understanding is that historically the town has utilized the county's efforts with respect to that, so that we don't have to expend the money for the consultant and the study and all that. And as they set their rates, we've used their rates. And there's a school impact fee, and there are others that we we collect the money here when you apply for a building permit. We send the money to the county. The ones for roads and park, we keep ourselves.
You say we use theirs, but didn't they reduce theirs?
We follow their rates, from what I'm told.
We reduced our rates as well?
What I understand is we follow their rates. I don't know if we reduced ours, but I know we were following their rates.
Well,
but you can see we're not bringing in very much money, so I could check that for you and let you know.
Yeah, I certainly was not in favor of how they handled that, and if we followed that lead, that's not something I want to continue.
Well, again, if we want to create our own rates, we would then have to engage a consultant to do a study, which is something.
No, they already got the consultant, which gave them the number X. They voluntarily reduced it below that number. We could still use their consultant information. We wouldn't have to hire a new consultant.
That's correct. If we stay at the rate that their consultant recommended, we could,
Exactly.
which I believe we're at, but we can confirm that.
Okay. So maybe get back to us in the next meeting with a message on that.
Yeah, we'll
Monday
send
or
you all
items.
an email with regard to that.
Thank you, Roger. Any other questions for Mr. Lang? Mr. Lang, anything else for us?
I'm good.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much for your
Great job.
work. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Next item is departmental reports.
Right, since we had an MP just a short while ago, I didn't want to burden you with departmental reports. You'll get that at your next MP. There were some updates that did happen that I did want to praise you of. One was dealt with some environmental issues, and that's in your kit. And the other was we got a further scheme or concept from on the signage that we shared with you all to see if it was more in line with what you were thinking.
Do you have any comments on that?
I reserve my comment to the strategy session.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I do feel that it encapsulated, though, the feedback that we gave, and I appreciate that. You seem to incorporate what all of us had indicated.
We do try to listen.
You did. That's what I noticed.
Anything else? Anything else, Roger? Joanne, did you have something?
Oh, I agree. We'll talk about strategy.
I have a question on this sheet here. It says filling in a Laguna Shores channel. it says town to address this, or the owners as a group, so what kind of group do you want? You want 100 people, or you want just the board of directors?
Okay, so where we are with, at least from a staff understanding, is where we are the last time we had conversations about these improvements. There are two types. There are the ones that the town's just going to do. You know, you allocate money, you authorize us, and we go do them. And then there are the ones that the neighborhood wants that we don't have a townwide program to implement, and the community gets together and they say, we want it. Then we would then report to the council. The majority of people in a particular area want a particular type of improvement, whether it's dredging or something else, a neighborhood park or whatever it is. Council says, okay, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Here's how much it's going to cost each property, or we're going to charge each property 75% of the cost, and we decide that we voluntarily want to kick in a certain amount of money. So we provide you sort of this semi-special district concepts on several occasions. We haven't heard the council say, no, we don't want to do that, so that's where we're at. So there's two approaches. One is the council says you're going to do it. I think examples of that are like the Hercules Dock, where council just said, well, yeah, it's a neighborhood improvement, but we're just going to pay for it, and we did. And then there are others where the council may want to partner with a neighborhood or not, depending on what the improvement is and whether they see it as a townwide benefit or not.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Did we just jump into agenda management? No, I got lost.
No, we're still on the departmental
Yeah,
reports.
before we totally exit just the financial thing, you know, I encourage all of you, if you have specific questions about what Mr. Lang handed out, to feel free to make an appointment to sit down with him or sit down with him and I to go over them. We're more than happy to discuss those with you in detail.
Very much. Okay, so anything else on the departmental reports? We'll move on to agenda management. Joanne, do you have anything?
No, I think I went down my list and everything was good.
Okay, Roxanne, anything?
I think we need to add the issue of advertising for on the bus shelters to a future workshop, that we want to consider that. That way we can say, hey, we're trying to meet you halfway here.
Okay.
Maybe it should just say an interlocal agreement with Lee-Tran for bus shelters, because I think that's what you're going to end up doing, right?
Don't we have to change our ordinance?
I have no idea.
I think we have an ordinance against advertising signs and things on the road, so.
Yeah, it says
We
no
would need to-
advertising on
Do the
benches.
Do the Bonita shelters have advertising? I don't think they do
No, but they
either.
pay that $1,500 per shelter
Yeah, they're-
per year, as compared to getting in $500 a year.
So maybe what we
income
should
if you
do is
allow it.
put on agenda management bus shelters and have a broader discussion.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Is
Anything
that
else?
for to be determined M&P?
Yes.
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I have a question for the council as a whole. I need a little bit of direction because I've never been a participant in your strategic planning process.
Oh, it's delightful. You'll really enjoy it,
So
John.
by your response, I already know the answer. I will be here.
What's your question?
You want to know whether you need to be here.
Oh,
Do you need-
sure. I think it's important for you to be here to know the direction of the town. Absolutely. Does anybody disagree?
Every time we're talking, he ought to be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair
Keep us
enough.
in line. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just
Thank
keep us
Roxanne,
in line.
anything else?
Yeah, I have one.
Wait. You're very chatty all of a sudden. I thought you were sick.
Wow, you said anybody else? And I said, yeah.
No, go
Roxanne?
ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Bruce?
As a follow-up to the parasailing discussion we had the other day,
Yes.
the fact that Pink Shell can drop off people at 5 locations with 1 license confused me somewhat. That didn't sound right. I've never read the regulations, so I don't know, but doesn't that sound odd? Is that something that should be reviewed? I always thought 1 license was kind of 1 spot.
Yeah.
And I'm just going hearsay based on what he said.
Yeah,
I don't know
exact-
that's a fact
yeah.
even.
I don't know.
Who could Bruce talk to in code enforcement who could maybe educate him about that, Roger?
I believe Ray handles the beach vendor licensing.
Talk
good
to her
person.
and
Yeah.
come back and let us know.
All right.
Anything else, Bruce?
I normally know that stuff by heart, but my brain is really not in it today,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's all right.
I'd be able to.
We're giving you a pass, Joanne. Anything else, Bruce? Vice Mayor Murphy? Nothing else? I don't have anything to add at this time, other than we are moving the street performers to the 15th agenda, right, Michelle?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay, and then the reason for that is that we're doing a quick review to see if we have any staff comments on the existing ordinance real quick, but
Okay, no problem. No
that's,
problem.
we'll
Just-
do our best.
Okay, anything else from anyone? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So, oh, am I supposed to do that? No?
Yeah, it does. You can just say.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Sure.
Is a motion to adjourn by Joanne, seconded by Roxanne. All in favor?
Aye.
And this meeting is adjourned at 12:01 PM.
Ooh, Gary.
Thank you all.
59 minutes ahead of schedule.
Overtime.